right, we're about to get started. Hit that like, everybody. Oh, God, so many pages open. Freaking out. We can pickle that. We can pickle that. Pickle that. Oh, yes. There we go. Substack is up. What's up, Substack people? Restack me. There we go. And Instagram is now live. Excellent. Thanks for the new like. I think we can get 10 subscribers. I think we can do that. Yes. We're getting close. All right. There we go. And we're set up so our guests will see us when they join us.
He's snarky, smart, and always by your side. It's Hal Sparks, Megaworldwide. News, laughs, and righteous sass. Kicks fake news right in the face. So smash that like and don't be shy. Subscribe now or blink and cry.
Yeah. We can do this. We can do this. Welcome to the show, everybody. It's Hal Sparks Mega Worldwide, the morning edition. Good to see you. This is where the news happens. This is where we talk, where you can open up, share our feelings, especially with the chat room, the greatest chat room in the history of the internet. Of course, perfect for the greatest stream in the history of the interwebs. I'm Hal Sparks, and I will be Hal Sparksing the rest of the Hal Sparks in the morning. Joined in the second hour by Philip Ittner, live from Kyiv, and we'll be talking about the wheel spinning going on in the Trump White House. I'm so good at this, I can solve it in an hour, but if I haven't, I'm going to give up like the little bitch that I am. Story that's going on. And even in spite of the dial back that Trump is trying to do, or the, I guess, sideswiping the peace, I don't know what party's even playing. This is all big bullshit anyways. But still, Ukraine standing their ground, gaining background, taking area in Kursk, shifting the modern concept of warfare right before our very eyes, and the little country that could, kicking Russia's sorry, flabby, Brazil undermining ass, which I will get to in as part of our morning stories. The New York Times has a, let's see, where is it? It has a, yeah, there we go. Has a story called The Spy Factory. Very sexy story, ladies and gentlemen. The Spy Factory. So, what the reason Brazil, and I'm sure there are a couple other countries like this, but the reason Brazil is the center of this story is because they had a bunch of people in that Russia was turning into Brazilian citizens by buying birth certificates, because they have this weird rule in Brazil where you, in a rural area, if you're from there, all you need are 2 witnesses to say that this lady had a baby on your birthday, on the general year and day that you were born, and they'll go, okay, sure. And suddenly you were born in Brazil. And it should come as no surprise that if you have a 10-year plan, what you get to do is some people come down there, they live as Brazilians, get a Brazilian. I don't know what qualifies you. Just getting the and all of a sudden you're a Brazilian. And then you qualify as a Brazilian witness for this person who's not real, who's a Russian spy who can, you know, and granted, I know what you're going to say, Hal, I'm sure these people look Brazilian at least. Meh. I don't know. Argentinian, maybe, you know, in the, some of the Nazis escaped and started having blonde and blue-eyed people in Argentina, had babies and twins and stuff. But I'm sorry, but there is no fucking way this dude isn't a Russian wrestler. So anyways, what these people do, these are 6 spies they busted, because they busted one in particular, and then that unraveled the whole scheme. But Brazilian counterintelligence uncovered 9 of these people. Hold on, let me show you the where is it? Ghosts in the system. Okay. So we called them during Biden. This just come as no surprise. So a Brazilian dude was flying to work at the International Criminal Court, and he was going to intern there as a Brazilian citizen on behalf of Brazil as part of the delegation of the ICC. Being diverse, diversity being our strength. We can't have all these fucking white countries like America and Russia, right? So let's go get some Latin Americans and put those on our panel so that we'll have a diverse life experience feeding into what the International Criminal Court is about. And so they hired this Russian guy. He's a Russian spy pretending to be Brazilian. And anyways, we caught wind of it. He was going to intern there for a job. Yeah, he went to the Netherlands right as the ICC was investigating war crimes against Russia. The would-be intern was traveling on a Brazilian passport under the name Victor Muller Ferreira. He received a graduate degree from Johns Hopkins under that name. So this dude fucking has been living as Victor Muller Ferreira. By the way, in the age of like somebody getting a scholarships based on racial diversity, equity attempts by Johns Hopkins, so weird. Where are the S's going? That it's so odd. University. But his real name is Sergei Cherkasov. He was just chirking everybody off. He's all trying to chirk us off. Dutch border officials had denied him entry, and he was now on a plane back to Sao Paulo. So they basically went, wait a minute. We got your thumbprints from something hinky years ago. You're not Brazilian. Get the fuck out of here. And so they turned him around. He was living in a hotel in Sao Paulo because the Brazilians didn't have enough to get a warrant on him. Finally got a warrant, arrested him for using fraudulent documents. That's all they could get him on at the time, because obviously that was the first step in it. And he was released on his own recognizance awaiting trial, and he had a Brazilian passport that was authentic. He had Brazilian voter registration card required by law. He had a certificate showing that he had completed compulsory military service in Brazil. All of it was real, and he's gone. And they came back. He had never really existed at all. He had a real birth certificate. So as soon as they found this fucker, and by the way, they were looking for him, and they went to pick him up after they realized all this stuff, and then he fucked off. And there's this old quote from Vladimir Putin, and I would like you to just fit this into your brainstem, if you will, chat machine that is out there. Just try to wrap your head around this and add it to the put a positive hitch in your get along, where you might be apt to or you might have preconceived notions that this only happens other places. It absolutely happens here, and you can argue that the Maria Bartiromo, Maria Bartiromo, listen to me, the Butina, the girl from the NRA, she was clearly setting people up for this, while there was a parallel track of these kind of sleepers happening in the United States. We discovered one in 2011. We kicked those people out. The idea that we got all of them is just kind of fucking stupid. And the idea that these people aren't joining both sides of every political argument and trying to set fires to make both sides hate each other so that there's no consensus that you can actually get to, because everybody has been vilifying each other and ratcheting up this shit. So anytime something seems a little extreme in the conversation, where somebody is really like spiking the ball, like this is how it's got to be, or you're fucking evil, beyond the obvious like support of direct genocide kind of thing, like yes, we should exterminate certain people. Like when people start talking like that, that's where the general consensus will go, fuck that person. But anybody who goes like one step further than in a really crazy way, or is ratcheting up stuff so that there's an unfalsifiable limit on behavior or language or something, where they set a standard no one can live up to, the purpose of that is to make an untenable argument, to make sure that nobody comes to consensus, to make sure that nobody comes to a balanced conclusion, or that democracy functions as it's supposed to. So this is Putin's quote on this. These are special people of a special quality, special convictions, and a special character. They're special. Something very special, I could tell you. Leaving behind your former life, leaving behind your loved ones and your family, leaving behind your country for many, many years to dedicate your life to serve the fatherland is not something everyone can do. Only the chosen can do it. And I say this without any exaggeration. What he means by chosen is you're going to go live as a fucking baker, or a journalist, or a salesman or something for like decades. And then one day you'll get a phone call to fuck shit up. Special, but it'll be a special phone call. So did anybody watch? I never watched it. Did anybody watch The Americans? Was it decent? What's your encapsulated review, chat room? Let me know. But the idea that there are sleeper cells in the world, or that has been a methodology that's happened for ever, is just understood. The other thing that's understood is that we don't do that. The United States doesn't have a version of that. It's really interesting. Like we have spies that are very directly engaged in this action, but once the action is over, they live out. We don't park people for years and have this. It's first of all, it's illegal under our system of government. You can't get clearance for it. And even if you did, the blowback possibilities, if you're not willing to just jettison people for the fuck of it, are way too high. So we just don't do it. It's skeevy. The first couple of seasons were good. That's often how it works, isn't it? So yeah, sort of. This is sort of a crucial thing to add to your thinking. There was, well, here we go. And then, so that story was just breaking, and that wasn't like, when you hear a story like that, it sounds like something out of the 70s. It's hard not to think of it as something that happened, in Stranger Things, right? In the 70s and 80s. Like it automatically makes you think we must have discovered this years ago. I'm not kidding you. No. We have other methods. That's not one of the standard issue ones. It just isn't. Sorry to tell. I mean, again, to quote Dan Bongholio, there's no there. So, if that's what you're talking about, or maybe you just think the series is good, or it's terrible. Look at that. Restream says, I've received 100 messages already. That's so fast. Hit the like, share the show, patreon.com/HalSparks. There's a free comedy show for the Patreon subscribers this Friday. Had to move it up a week because my kid's birthday is next week, so I'm taking a couple days off, if that's okay with you, boss, to go spend some time with him. Now, the other thing is the big, bad, beautiful bullshit bill is... I saw an article this morning, like, at one of the first things I saw was, checking on this, that, progress is made with Trump's bill, like, where is it? I don't know. There was this, like, it made it sound like they were actually making progress and that it was going to happen. And then, like, an hour later, all the headlines changed. Which tells me that, like, some stuff is written on what the White House says. Like, they release a statement. They're like, yep, we got it nailed. Don't worry about it. It's coming. And people are so habitually used to taking the White House's word for it to at least a certain extent that they're like, oh, they wouldn't say that if that wasn't true. And it clearly isn't. So they just went, oh, well, fuck that, and scuttled it. So the follow-up was this guy. Hold on, let me see if I can just put this in the reader format. You can see it this way. Trump tax bill threatened by ultra-conservatives over SALT deal. So here's the thing. There are something like 10 or 15 very powerful Republicans from blue states that are in, blue, like reddish purple districts where a lot of money sits, Silicon Valley, that kind of stuff. And people who make money off of those people. So there's a lot of barnacle counties as well. And those folks, represent a huge section of the tax base that wants the SALT, like the state and local tax element put back in, they want it cut. Originally, it was kind of unlimited. It was whatever your state tax was, you get to take that out, and then you get that as credit towards your federal taxes. But then the states where there's no income tax were like, hey, these big states are taking out some of their tax dollars that they want to spend on their own state, and they're supposed to put their dollars, California is supposed to put their dollars in the federal system so that they can pay us to not have an income tax in our state. That's really what the complaint is about. And make no mistake about it, when the Republicans that are against the SALT tax are all from donor states. They're all from red states that get money from blue states. So why would they want people in the blue states that make all the money and send all that money to the federal government? Why would they want to go, whoa. No. We're going to pay for our stuff in California or in Illinois or in New York or whatever. And after we cover our bill, then we'll give to the federal government and you guys can divvy that up. That's why it will blow a hole in the deficit, because the red states don't give in federal tax dollars, they take. And the blue states, if they have the SALT deduction, it'll give them a chance to not give as much and take care of their own constituents instead of taking the money that they make in these states that the red states always shit on and spreading it finally over those states so they can pretend they're a bunch of fucking bootstrappers. So, just assholes. Okay. Conservative hardliners, and so this is the thing. The Chip Roys of the world, the Freedom Caucasians, they're a much bigger group, I think, than the SALT group. It's hard to tell. But these are the folks, or maybe it's the other way around. Either way, you've got, it doesn't matter, because the margin is so small, you can't lose anybody. And they're, in one situation, they're looking at losing 12 people. And in another situation, they're looking at losing 35 to 40 people guaranteed. And then there's a lot of overlap between those groups where you've lost all of them if you do one or both. It's so fucked up. Which is why they have to do these things at 1 o'clock in the morning and why they don't want to talk about what's in it. And they want to pass it as quickly as possible through reconciliation so nobody gets a chance to read it. All the things they said about the Affordable Care Act, about how, Democrats, this bill's so big, nobody's had a chance to read it. Nobody's going to fucking read the big, beautiful bill. Nobody's even talking about that. And they're like, will people have time to read the big, beautiful bill before it's voted on? 72 hours or whatever the mandatory thing is. Will they have a chance to go through it? And can you even go through something that big? How many pages are in it? That is the question that a lot of these folks need to be asking when they're talking to any of these dickheads. When Mike Johnson's there, like, how many pages are in this bill? What does the big, beautiful bill look like? You're talking about it big. Are we talking 3,000 pages, 5,000 pages? What are we talking about? And then go, if that's, if it is a big, beautiful bill like you're talking, it's enormous like that, and it's got all these provisions and elements in it, then shouldn't people have time to read it? And certainly 3 days wouldn't be enough, under your own, and granted, you'll always fail the hypocrisy test. Nobody actually believes you guys give a shit about this. But what you pretend to give a shit about is that people have time to read a bill this big. Yeah. So Mike Johnson announced Wednesday that he had an agreement with lawmakers from high tax states to increase the limit on the SALT deduction to $40,000. And shortly after, ultra conservatives lashed out. Several hardline Republicans said House GOP leaders aren't honoring concessions the White House promised them. Trump and Johnson plan to meet with some of the ultra-conservative lawmakers at the White House at 3 p.m. A person familiar with the plan said House Republicans leaders are also planning to accelerate new Medicaid work requirements to December 2026 from 2029 in a bid to satisfy ultra-conservatives, according to a lawmaker familiar with the discussions. Now, what is this? What are they talking about here? 2026 to 2029. Okay, here's the thing. Trump wants to run as as Santa Claus and govern as the Grinch is the situation. So he ran as Santa Claus. No Medicare cuts, no Medicaid cuts, no changes in it. We're not going to fuck with Medicaid or Medicare. We're going to protect all these things. Don't you worry about it. And we're only going to go after waste, fraud, and abuse, which is, don't worry about the giant Yeti. He's got a hangnail, and as soon as we get that cleared out, he'll go back to smashing your head against a tree. We'll deal with this giant monster by dealing with how it sheds. So, what Trump's budget does, and what this big, beautiful bill thing does, is it pushes all the difficult parts in this 10-year arc of the bill, of basically their budget for the next 10 years. It pushes them to the end. So all this stuff doesn't kick in till halfway through the next president's term, or like 1 year from the election after. So let's say a Democrat gets elected, all these things kick in the election year of the next Democrat would be the idea. If it's a Republican in there and they've still got control, they'll just keep punting it. But if it's a Democrat, they'll make them solve the problem. They'll drive the deficit up, so there's no way you can give national health care if the budget's if the deficit and the debt are so high, right? So the impetus to grow the debt and the deficit is always there to keep Democrats from using money properly for things that people actually want and need. So that's why in the middle of this deficit hawk bullshit storyline that they're telling, he wants a golden dome. He wants, they're all talking about there's funding in this bill for National Guard troops permanently stationed at the southern border. That's when Biden was saying we need to, you can't do it unilaterally. You have to pass a bill to do it. Well, the reason is because the Congress funds it. And when the Congress funds it, then you can station those people there. You don't have to use emergency funding, and it goes into the regular budget, and it doesn't, what it adds to the deficit and what it doesn't, and you can say, under PAYGO, you can affect that. Otherwise, if you don't, then it's just this blind spot, and you have to pay for while pretending to not know what's in that opaque section of the budget. It's the same thing with Obama's military spending went up like crazy in his first term, and and that's because we stopped paying for the Iraq and Afghanistan war on a credit card, and we put it in the regular budget instead of these supplementals. So we dealt like it with adults, like adults would. So, and the problem is that there are like 3 or 4 of these guys that, Mike Johnson it says he's got this deal, but Ron Johnson is against it. So is Rand Paul and a couple others. They go still ultra-conservative Andy Harris of Maryland said Wednesday morning the Trump administration promised them in a midnight deal deeper cuts in Medicaid and faster elimination of Biden-era clean energy tax breaks. I'm sorry, but that's a pay grade above the speaker. That means the president promised me this shit. You guys don't get to, walk it back. He has to he has to tell me to go fuck myself. I'm not going to let you tell me that. And that's one of the reasons why they're all fighting and as heavily as they are. So it's kind of a joy to watch that happen. And it's kind of how about Doc Johnson? Johnson. I want my Johnson, right?
Oh, nice marmot.
Right. So this is another example of that. Mike Johnson faces 11th hour blow up on Trump's big bill because there are irreconcilable differences. They're talking about the salt cap there, I think. Yeah. Ralph Norman of South Carolina, another, told Axios in a text message, things are not looking good. I'm pretty sure he went caps lock. Like, yeah. The deal would raise it to 40. Income phase out would grow by 1% over 10 years, and the deduction would become permanent, which is how they, again, it's worse at the end, so they can put off the accumulative costs for a few years, namely Trump's term. So they can pretend the debt isn't going up under him, and then the next president, no matter who they are, they'll if it's a Republican, they'll just continue to lie about it. If it's a Democrat, they'll blame them for the spending, even if they walked in the door. Right. Some conservatives, however, feel the bill doesn't go far enough in cutting Medicaid and nutrition assistance spending. There's no doubt about that. The bill actually got worse overnight. There is no way to pass it today, Harris said on Newsmax. Boo fuckity who. And as for timing, he said, open the vote on the bill as early as Wednesday. We plan to do it tonight. That's my plan. Harris says otherwise we may need a couple weeks to iron everything out, but it's not going anywhere today. They do not have the votes to pass this stupid fucking thing. And Trump yesterday, I showed you guys this last night. Trump comes out and basically says, the Senate might cut it up into other pieces. So if that's what they got to do, that's what they got to do. Well, then it's not one big beautiful bill, dumb fuck. And so why don't they just do that now? Because you can't pass the tax cut by itself without the cuts, and you can't pass the cuts to get the tax cut through because you don't have votes for enough crossover votes to make both things tenable to the same group of people. And Democrats aren't going to help you carry this bullshit across the line because they're against both. At least in certain circumstances, you'd have like the Democrats are for this one thing and the Republicans are for this other thing, and we just want more of the Republican thing than the Democrats have of their thing, and so we got some overlapping ground to work with. That's not what this is. Democrats don't want you to cut Medicare, Medicaid, and Social Security and SNAP and food benefits for poor people. Why would we? And then on top of that, we certainly don't want to make Trump's tax cuts permanent because they're what blew a hole in the debt in the first place. So dumb. It's so dumb. It's the laundromats. It's the laundromats. So I don't see. I mean, I don't know. I don't know anybody who sees this going anywhere. On top of that, I showed you a little bit of this last night, guys. By the way, hit the like, share the show, subscribe. Last night I showed you a bit of the Cuttery interview that he did with this thing, and he ended up. We didn't do the whole thing because why would you? He's not. It's not like he's going to say anything interesting. He's going to be an asshole. But Musk called the woman asking him questions an NPC. Like, this is how you know this is just a rich dickhead who spends way too much time online. His whole fucking life is on Twitter now. Like, he talks in meme talk. It's so fucking weak. And I'll get to how weak in a second. He goes, where is it? Here. Yeah, maybe I'll switch to reader. There we go. Musk insults interviewer for daring to ask about his big Doge promise. He goes, he said it's like talking to a computer talking to her. Well, first of all, asshole, don't you have an AI that's supposed to be super smart and charming? So I don't know that helps. I mean, maybe you just mean that no matter what you do, computers keep spitting facts right back at you, no matter how much you don't like them. So he said he was going to cut $2 trillion from the deficit, not the debt, the deficit, the actual cost of governance year on year. Okay? Let's be abundantly clear. We're not talking about we're going to cut $2 trillion over the course of 10 years, over the course of 4 years. We're going to cut $2 trillion from the deficit. The actual, the government spending for the year to eliminate the deficit is basically what he's saying. We're making 5, we're spending 7, we're going to eliminate that deficit entirely. And then he comes in and goes, well, half that. $1 trillion. But we can easily do that. Oh my God, have you seen the waste and the fraud and the abuse and the waste and the fraud and the abuse and the waste and the fraud and the abuse? And after all his stupid fucking cuts that ended up like gutting medical research for Alzheimer's and cancer and cutting SNAP benefits and paring back everything they could get their fucking hands on, what was the number he came up with? 160 billion. That's the top. Which, by the way, is about how much, with the size of our government, every administration cuts when they come in. But it fails to mention, as I think I'm the only person mentioning, I think I'm the only person that keeps bringing this up, that spending is up over last year's budget another $45 billion. So Biden budget spending already for this year is over that to 145 billion. Okay, so Trump is spending all the money that Biden was so like money printer go burr. They're just throwing money at every fucking problem and throwing it in. Remind me about the border in a second, because I had one of my pet peeve epiphanies this morning. Hashtag that if you can. But the math, I would like to remind everyone that if this is the spending level, and you have cut that spending 160 billion, according to you, but we're spending 145 over that, that means you're spending 300 billion more than you say you are. Because even with these cuts, you've just added this. Also, by the way, the cuts are bullshit. So it's probably closer to 450 billion. It's like, by the middle of the year, the things that Trump is proposing, they're going to be spending $500 billion more per year than Biden's budget. We're going to be at like 7.5. You watch, and he won't give a shit, because the idea is that he's used to bribing everyone. So the tariff shit where he paid the farmers and all that kind of stuff, he viewed that as a way of bribing voters in a central part of the country. And so if he's got to borrow money, I mean, he's not going to be around when it has to be paid off. And he doesn't give a shit about his kids, and they've all got deals in Qatar and shit like that. So it's not like they're going to be on the hook as taxpayers when this comes, because they're going to try and eliminate the income tax entirely by the time this works out. So he doesn't give a shit if he just has to rack up debt to like artificially fuel economic growth. Everything they said that Democrats do, that we were allegedly puffing up the economy, making it, these are government hires, and that's why we have good unemployment numbers. With they're filling in with illegals, right? Oh, that reminds me, real quick. One of the reasons why this stood out, you know what the code word they use in Brazil for these Russian spies is? The group. Let's see if I can. They have a nickname, a code word for them. Operation East was the program when they were going for them. They call them. Where is it? Ghosts were the things. Where I find it. They call them illegals. They literally call the Russians that are sneaking into the country, pretending to be from there, living. Like this one guy ran a company called 3D Rio. It was a 3D printing thing. Although he always had more money than the company could have possibly made, so everybody thought that was hinky. And he had a lot of European trips he would just fly off to, and whatever. And the work that he did, like everybody's like, he was a workaholic. He would often send people home and work by himself. Also, he had this weird thing, like he wouldn't leave his computer hooked up to the internet when he wasn't sitting at it. These guys worked in his shop. And we're like, he was a what? Let's see. No real achievements at work. Oh yeah, and the reason, one of the things they discovered was when he fled the country, they left behind he left 12 grand in his safe and a phone that he was using to talk to his actual wife, who was stationed in Greece in a similar situation. She probably works for Kimberly Guilfoyle at this point. Irina Shimreva, another Russian spy, texting from Greece. And he was like, I'm not here. I've been here for 2 years and nothing's happening. And she's, if you wanted a normal family life, well, you have made fundamentally wrong choice. Fuck. All right. So marrying you and going through all this was a fundamentally wrong choice? Or you're blaming me because we're both doing this? So, anyways, they called them the illegals, this group, when they find these spy networks. He spoke Gringo Portuguese. And then he never showed up for work again. And the Brazilians running Operation East had spent countless hours uncovering the names. Yeah, they had no case against the guy. And then, and the other thing too is this one. So one of the other stories is that Interpol, like the UN Security Council, shares intel as part of its job and its details with everybody on it. And Russia, since 1991, or probably 1994 at some point, started working as any other country would with Interpol, tracking down criminals and that kind of stuff. Or if you have an international criminal you're trying to track down, you go through that and you have access to it almost like VICAP. And the Russians just used it as a way to tell their people that were hidden in these countries whether somebody was onto them or not, or whether somebody was looking for them. So it was one of the ways that they snatched this dude out of the country was they put out an Interpol alert because the guy was using false documents, and then suddenly he gets this free trip to Russia and is gone. So they do red notices, which is an international arrest warrant. They did a red notice on this guy, and then suddenly he was back in Russia. And then Russia uses these red notices to go after people who are critics. Yeah. Just so stupid. So, and then they use the blue notices, which is just like getting everybody's FBI file. They can get your jacket just by putting a blue notice out on you. Yeah. And this is how they get around it. While Interpol now reviews every red notice before it's issued, it does not scrutinize blue notices until they have circulated. Those after-the-fact checks have identified 700 alerts since 2018 that violated Interpol's rules. That's Russia, for example, was able to issue a blue notice for a man seeking asylum in Florida. It claimed he was wanted for assault and homicide of a man who Russian court records showed was still alive. So they just made up a story about him, issued a blue notice. We want information. He's a suspect, possibly wanted in a murder. The guy who was supposed to be murdered wasn't dead. And they were basically just tracking this dude. And then stolen, lost passports. So that if it shows up, like let's say you give one of your agents a stolen or they're using a lost, stolen, or fake passport, and it gets flagged, they get notice of that flagging. So if it's one of their spies, they can know to move this person around or get them new creds. Aren't they lovely? Isn't Russia lovely? So the back here, Elon Musk, yeah. Not to be confused with blue and red notes and blueprints. Yes, not at all. Yes, there's an Oval Office meltdown. Well, stay tuned, kids. 8 migrants sent to South Sudan in deportation flight. Officials confirm. Yeah. Hey, the uncommitted, congratulations. You got everything you want plus people being dumped in Sudan, in South Sudan, in the middle of a civil war. Congrats. And the idea that Trump is like turning his back on Netanyahu or they're not meeting with him, let me be abundantly clear. They know it's going to be politically untenable or difficult or bad news. So while the rest of the world is standing and criticizing Israel and Netanyahu as they should, the Trump White House is saying basically nothing. They didn't avoid those trips because they were giving him the cold shoulder. They avoided those trips because he's in the middle of his corruption trial. Netanyahu is. I don't know if you guys saw that, but like in between all this shit, he's still like giving testimony in his fucking corruption trial, which is continued. And they just don't want to. They don't want to draw attention to it. Yeah, they're not going to say anything about the tornadoes either. They don't give a shit. Honestly, there's a bunch of these folks in Trump world that just, the Peter Thiel useless eater crowd that thinks there's just too many people. We're saving too many weak people that don't deserve to be around, don't deserve to live. They're taking resources from the good people, the strong and the powerful and the worthwhile, right? I mean, this is the part that's going to get worse. This is the part that if you want to talk about like what's seriously going to impact lives, it's already happening. And it's the irony, and this is why the salt tax thing is actually a big deal, is because like I was saying, that we're going to, under Trump, what you're going to have to do is really work with your local government and, watch, if somebody's coming up for election or whatever, and you can broom a Republican and get a Democrat in there of any stripe. Like the idea that there should be a purity test is again one of those things that I find sketchy as fuck and counterproductive. You have Democrats, you got one job: turn red districts purple, purple districts blue. That's it. So in the process, nobody gets credit at all for blue versus bluer. I don't care. Seriously. Like, we wouldn't even be talking about the irony. The irony. We would not be talking about this big, beautiful bill bullshit if Manchin and Sinema were still in there. As much as you might hate them, as much as I find her ridiculous and him an asshole, the truth is they wouldn't have allowed it. Those would have been no votes. We know they wouldn't have had the margin if they were still in there. If those two were still in there. Period. And who's in there now? People who will vote for it. Right? So, well, in the case of West Virginia, anyways. So, that got them one vote closer. This idea that there's a better Democrat than another Democrat, it's all about who can get elected in these districts at this point. You don't get to start refining the recipe when you're making, bread for starving people. This is fucking crucial. And the idea that you can go, well, is there really a difference? Yeah, there's really a fucking difference. There's really a difference. And if you don't know that, it's because you're willfully not watching like this shit. All the stuff that's going on in the Congress currently. This stuff that's going on. That stuff I showed you guys where Thune was bitching about how Republicans are trying to get these confirmations through, and Democrats are doing everything they can to force a voice vote on these things, and against cloture and all these kind of things. They want a written on the record vote for all of these, and it's just slowing the whole thing down because it's the only power that they have right now, and they're using every ounce of it. The Andy Harris quote is all over the place. I think we're further away from a deal because of that salt cap increase, I think, upset a lot of conservatives. Again, that's because blue states are the donor states, and the Republicans, these conservatives that they're talking about, fucking know it. And in the case of There's 2 states, I would argue, where there are Republicans from those states that are against raising the SALT tax, where you could argue that there's more money to be had for them long term, but it doesn't balance out because it's Texas and Florida. And the amount of like hurricane damage and weather damage that both of those states deal with, they always need federal assistance. Anyways, they need the rest of the country, especially the blue states, to pick up the slack for Florida, especially, and Texas. So they don't want that, even though that SALT provision would help maybe some of their people, the trade-off is just too drastic. And even the people who live there, especially Florida, because of all the hurricanes and stuff like that, they need that federal guarantee or they wouldn't be able to get insurance anymore. So I think we're actually further away is the headline this morning. Also, the bill itself, I've been looking for, and maybe somebody can chat room. We'll see if we can find it. But let's see, text of Republican bill, big, beautiful, whatever. What's in there? You're gonna. The mega bills and potential impacts. More than 8 million recipients who lose Medicaid. It cuts SNAP, extends the 2017 tax cuts, puts no taxes on tips and no taxes on overtime work, which of course, again, lets you cut the amount, like how much you pay for overtime, and it basically zeroes it out. Provides $50 billion wall construction, right? Commits $150 billion to defense spending for shipbuilding and Golden Dome, right? Important to note, impacts of the bill are estimated based on early analysis. The estimates and legislative texts have not been finalized, right? So I don't know. We've only seen what they're talking about in committee, actually. So the border. Here's my question. Chat room, work with me on this. They're asking for more border funding. Will you ask Cal about those 3 Russian military satellites launched February 5th, Golden Dome connection? Yeah, Gino, we talked about that a little bit yesterday. Gino Maynard is asking the 3 Russian... I brought this up like a couple of weeks ago, like this story started gaining ground. I think it was in February. Yeah, it was February 5th. That these 3 Russian satellites surrounded a piece of space junk or a satellite that was up there, a decommissioned, maybe it was one of their own. And then something came out of one of them and hit the satellite that was in between them all and knocked it into a decaying orbit, so it burned up. And so it looked like it was a test run on an attack satellite system. Oh, thanks. CSL. Rules Committee print of these things. Okay, there we go. This is, yeah. Yeah, here we go. One of the things that they did was Department of Defense, Committee on Education Workforce, subtitle, like they repealed the tax on indoor tanning beds if you want to buy one. Those will be tax-free. And they repealed the excise tax on silencers. There was an excise tax on silencers, and apparently that was removed. Repeals and rescissions. Clean heavy-duty vehicles. It's all clean air emissions stuffs. Here you go. This is a big portion of what they're doing. This is really what, for Trump world, this is what this is about. Repeal and rescission relating to funding for implementation of the American Innovation and Manufacturing Act. Repeal and rescission relating to funding for enforcement of technology and public information. Relating to greenhouse gas corporate reporting. Repeal and rescission related to environmental product declaration assistance. For methane emissions and waste reduction incentive program for petroleum and natural gas systems. Greenhouse gas air pollution plans and implementation grants. Relating to Environmental Protection Agency efficient, accurate, and timely reviews. Well, they're going to repeal the EPA giving efficient any funding to increase the efficiency, accurateness, and timeliness of reviews by the EPA. Low embodied carbon labeling for construction materials. This is just so they can lie about where they got it from. Greenhouse gas stuff. Yeah. CAFE standards, artificial intelligence, the artificial intelligence and information technology. Let's see. Section 43201, the Artificial Intelligence and Information Technology Modernization Initiative, which is effectively a rollback of the safety stuff that people put in, that Biden put in. Medicaid, reducing fraud and improving enrollment process. That's a hilarious name for this. Prevent wasteful spending. And for under Medicare, Medicaid. Yeah. This is just their way of cutting stuff and giving it a spit polish. Increasing personal accountability. Hey, cripple, get up there and start working 18 hours a day as a volunteer someplace, or we're not going to pay you, or get a job. Addressing waste, fraud, and abuse in ACA exchanges. Is that funding for that? I don't even know what, So, and these are all, by the way, just the pieces of this stuff. Then it goes and it breaks them down. So, immigration fees applicable to the asylum fee, employment authorization, the Trump, whatever, the gold card is probably in here. Use of funds, Executive Office of Immigration Review, information about sponsors, U.S. Secret Service, other matters, limitation of donations made pursuant to settlement agreements to the United States as a party, solicitation of orders to fine, restrictions on enforcement on what, how many free planes you can get from Qatar. Bunch of gas leases for drill. This is all the drill baby drill, permitting fee for non-federal land, federal land, geothermal leasing, royalties, coastal plant oil and gas leasing, the National Petroleum Reserve in Alaska, Minnesota, Ambler Road in Alaska, coal leasing, future coal leasing, coal royalty, authorization to mine federal minerals so we can have coal mines in all our great parks, offshore oil and gas, renewable energy, wildlife. Yeah, this is this is a catch-all for all kinds of stuff. Yeah, and they're eliminating all the management stuff for national parks. Just fuck it. Let everybody ride their ATVs through national parks. This is Committee on Ways and Means, the one big beautiful bill. Make American families and workers thrive again. Subtitle. I think they work more on the subtitles than they did on anything else. This is the tax break. This is keeping the Trump tax stuff. No tax on tips. These are their parts of it. Now, this is, I think, let me see what this is. Yeah, here we go. That's just the list of stuff that's in this. And then here's the actual text of the bill. Hold on, let me squeeze this down a little bit. Here we go. This will be the able-bodied thing. Able-bodied adults without dependents waivers. By amending paragraph to read as follows. In general, on the request of a state agency and within the support of the chief executive officer of the state, the secretary may waive the applicability of paragraph 2 for not more than 12 consecutive months to any group of individuals in the state if the secretary makes a determination that the county or county equivalent in which the individuals reside has an unemployment rate of over 10%. And in paragraph by striking 8% and inserting 1%. So they're adjusting whatever the standards are. That if you have anything below, if there's 1% unemployment in your county, no matter what those jobs are, if they're all in construction, but you are homebound, or you have medical issues or age or any of these other things, if there's 1% of jobs open, you have to take those jobs, even if it's jart catcher. No matter what the job is. Well, good. Thanks for doing this, CSL. I'm gonna look through all this as of today. But one of the things that I don't know if we can scroll through this and find, because is it a PDF? Blink. We'll work on that in a bit because Phil's going to be with us in like 3 minutes. So, but this is the issue that they have. This act may be cited as the One Big Beautiful Bill Act. I'm just a bill, one big beautiful bill, and I'm really here as Donald Trump shill, and I work for the billionaires, helping them keep their money while poor people live and on so little it's funny, and I'm stuck here sitting with you. Yeah, a lot of this. Oh, there he is. There's Phil coming in. Give me 1 second. Think, and then we'll put him in there. What's up, Phil? How are you? Give me 1 second. I'll bring you in.
I'm all right.
Excellent.
Literally just checking the Kiev post, so
Well, all right.
I haven't had any time. Oh, the thing in Madrid.
Which thing?
Oh, the Golden Dome balloon.
Yeah.
Oh, a former person in the Yanukovych administration was killed, assassinated in Madrid.
Gotcha. All right. Welcome. Hey, everybody.
Probably SBU.
It's we start the conversation right out of the gate. It's our dear friend Phil Bittner, host of On the Edge. Please check out his show every Sunday. Poop picker upper. Thank you so much. And love you for that. So we're just talking a bit about the big shit bill that is falling apart, which is fine. I mean, it's fun to watch, but the reality is that well, let's start in right away with I don't know if you saw any of Marco Rubio getting his ass handed to him on the in his committee. Yeah, but one of the things that was brought up repeatedly was like, hey, what happened? You used to call Putin a war criminal, and now you won't say it. What gives? Now, I personally think that now that he's Secretary of State, the job necessitates a lighter tone. It is different than being a senator, and people can be more firebrand in this stuff. But you don't have to dodge it, the way he did and get kind of hostile to the person asking it, because it's a legit question. And what you can say is there's a difference between representing my constituents in Florida specifically and ultimately representing the United States as a whole. And we are in a very delicate negotiation. So I'm going to refrain from as direct language as you are asking me for. That said, we will. It's not about what I think. It's about who I represent and what the task we're trying to do.
I'm a member of the administration. I serve at the pleasure of the president. We have policy that we are implementing that may have been contradictory when I was,
just
a member of
the senator from
legitimate. I wouldn't exactly agree with it, given the exact circumstances, because Moscow is a vile enemy of the United States.
Yeah,
and the fact that there should be any light between those two issues is disturbing enough. But that would have been the way to answer it. But
just do your he's Secretary of State, and there's a difference. Right.
Yeah, and he's Secretary of State, and also, but here's another problem. Here's the biggest problem that I have growing with Secretary of State Rubio, and I say that because this is like the latest in a whole long list of disagreements I have with Marco Rubio, including in foreign policy, including in being aggressive against Moscow. I think his idea of sanctions isn't strong enough, and we can go into like pre-Secretary of State Rubio's positions. I even had disagreements with him then, but I have massive disagreements with him now. And in addition to that, as head of the State Department, as we learned just last week, when I spoke to a former ambassador from the United States to Kiev, who I regret slightly that I didn't dig a little bit deeper with him on this, but he was clearly stating from a position of knowledge, given that he was a former ambassador, and then I'm sure he still speaks to people who are on what's called the Russia desk in the State
Mhm.
Department, they're not coordinating.
Right.
They're not. The administration is not going to the Russia desk. The Secretary of State is acting, it appears, is acting independent of his own department, because to engage with his own department is seen to engage with the deep state.
Right.
So he can't go to the Russia desk, and he certainly can't take any information gained from the Russia desk to the Oval.
That's
Because
right.
if the Oval asks, where are you getting this? And they say the Russia desk at the State Department, they go, deep state, it's
Deep
all
state.
bull.
Boogie, boogie,
It's all
boogie, boogie. Right.
boogie,
So,
boogity, 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 boogie.
Right.
A bunch of guys who have dedicated their entire lives to understanding a region and our relationship to that region, but because they've been here as professionals in
Mhm.
their field,
They can't be
you've
trusted.
been here too long and you're
Right.
part of the swamp. You
this is-
morons, you
again-
idiots, you jackass, you jacketing. I just
Yeah, it's so
I
infuriating.
don't that's what they're there for. You are supposed to go to them and go, who are the places? The fact that 3 weeks ago, I'm sorry, that 3 weeks ago, we had the administration apparently making overtures to what they thought were the opposition against Zelensky in Kiev, but they were talking to guys whose careers are dead and have been dead for a very long time. Yulia Tymoshenko and Petro Poroshenko. Both of them are seen here on the ground in Ukraine as the past.
Yeah.
They don't have a political future. The fact that the administration made overtures to them further indicates to me, and I wouldn't be terribly surprised if Ambassador Pfeiffer or even McFaul, as cautious as he is, would disagree with me when I say, had you simply gone to your Ukraine desk, or for fuck's sake, even your Russia desk, they probably would have said to you, that's a non-starter. Waste of time. You want to talk to these guys? Talk to Sirski. Talk to you know.
Well, part of it is that's the issue, though.
But they aren't doing their damn jobs.
Well, here's the thing.
These are professionals.
That's because they're not doing our definition of their job. I would argue they are doing their job, which is on behalf of Vladimir Putin in this regard. And talking to those people and it being a non-starter is a feature, not a bug. And that these guys know that if they talk to the people who really can say something or are really representative of what the Ukrainian people want, they're going to be told to go fuck themselves, and rightly so. So they dance around that we spoke to people that we've spoke to before. Like, at this point, why don't they just fucking call Yanukovych's corpse in fucking Russia or wherever he is currently, right? So it is meant to be a distraction. Because to the average person, it sounds like they're talking to former leaders of Ukraine. Maybe they have a problem with Zelensky, so they'll talk to somebody else that was voted in, right?
Somebody's got a grievance, and they'll go, but they don't understand. It's not about that. It's about the fact that their time has come and gone. And it's interesting to me, this whole thing about, like, we can't talk to these guys because they are indeed professionals. But I don't know a lot of guys at State. I never got along with the guys at State. The State attracts. They're a little bit snooty. They're a little bit up their own ass. The guys that like run the guys that like run the embassy, and it does filter up all the way to like the ambassadorial positions or consular positions or stuff like that. But they have an atmosphere at State that always kind of like rubbed me the wrong way. I always got on better with the intelligence guys and the military guys.
Right.
But because of my contacts, in particular with intelligence, which, you know, those lines blur in military and intelligence communities. They for shit. I forgot we're not on radio.
Yeah.
They for fuck no. Those guys, the intelligence guys and the military guys, they know exactly what's going on, and the fact that Russia has deeply infiltrated our country, and a lot of this is being done.
Yeah.
But State, I would argue. I'll just finish with saying, I would bet you State. I didn't necessarily get along with the guys from State, but they're not stupid and they're professionals. And I know for sure that there are. Well, I feel it in my bones that there are guys at State who are like, house on fire, house on fire, house on fire. This is Russian. You know, propaganda, information warfare, their diplomacy in quotation marks is bullshit. They are fucking us. They're repeatedly fucking us, and we are not responding as we should, and that is highly suspicious.
Okay.
I would be very surprised if somebody who was at state or on the rest of that disagreed with me with that.
Yeah, and that there'll be basically like a blow up of whistleblowers, which Trump will call leaks over the next couple of months as they start
Right.
like reaching whatever their line is where I can't go any further. This has got people got to know. So in the middle of you saying I had two things, now I have three. One is I don't know if you saw, but I was talking about this thing in Brazil where they discovered this network of Russian spies that were using Brazil as a launching point for the rest of the world, where they would come down there, get fake IDs and all this kind of stuff, live as Russians for years, and then they would get, one of them went to intern at the ICC right after the war started to push back on, going after Russia for war crimes. They do this kind of stuff. They're building it on. So the idea that they're not doing it here, that they've stopped doing it here, or that they won't because they're scared of Trump is just horseshit, and they're not doing anything about it. The second thing is that there was a big strike on in the Midwest yesterday over the weekend. I think it's technically ongoing, a ransomware strike on a bunch of hospitals. And so emergency care is still going on because they don't necessarily need people's records to directly do it. But anybody who had elective surgery or scheduled surgery that was not elective, or they were, timing it for your own health or whatever you had to do, gallbladder surgery, all those kind of things, was all punted or had to be moved to an entirely different system because these guys are ransomwaring all the information that's in it. Interlock is the group that's doing it. They are a rebirth of, I forget what the name, I want to say it was Beridia, but there was a Ridiata, whatever. Anyways, there was another hacker group totally paid for with fucking Russian money, totally paid for with fucking Russian crypto payments. And they don't care if they're even successful. That's the part that I don't think people understand. Same thing with North Korea. Like North Korea, you could argue, is they want their ransomware and their cyber attack extortion schemes to work because they need money. North Korea is very poor, and so they need the money. Russia is definitely over a barrel as far as their spending, but they have options that North Korea doesn't have, and their size and their reach and their relationship with China, yada, yada. But they are definitely in a hole. But they don't necessarily need to make a profit on these things. It works as a countermeasure all by itself. If you can just fuck up the system and make it look like everybody's terrible at their job, and you could argue that Duffy in the FAA is one of the victims of this and is too fucking stupid to know that the failures that are happening aren't accidents. They're meant to undermine people's faith in the government, because the last people with utter faith in the government, blind faith, are maggots right now. That I don't think Democrats and people on my side of the aisle or even independents have ever had blind faith in it. We just trust certain people to be better at dealing with it than other people. We don't think there will never be waste, fraud, and abuse. We just want to look at the people who will minimize it while not damaging the rest of the people. The same way you look at the legal profession. We want to put as many murderers and rapists and people guilty of assault in jail as you can without putting a bunch of people who are innocent in with them by just overreach. So that working that matters. And so who's in charge fucking matters. But with Trump's crowd, these guys they're red flamers. They love Trump so much they got a big red flame flying out of their ass. And if they lose their faith in the government, or they think the deep state has co-opted Trump and all this stuff, then when they snap, you get Jan 6s everywhere. They will see a boogeyman behind every, in every state house, in every legislative branch, in any police station in the country, and they'll all go Timothy McVeigh. And while there's that paranoid aspect will turn them on each other and turn them on their fellow Americans, they'll never realize that like the Russians are flicking them every possible way, just undermining that thing. And you don't have to do one big attack. You just have to chip away at people's like.
Well, why go after the medical system? Because they know that is an inflection point, that is a fracture in our society. Mm-hmm. There are people who, are very, upset about, how Medicare, how medical care is done in the United States. And so poke at that. Poke. And, when I say this, I know that people oftentimes, I know how I would react if I hadn't put in the years and I said to you, the Russians are behind everything. You would go, "What? You're crazy."
Right.
Let me articulate what I mean. They're not behind everything, but everything that happens, they will jump in on.
Right.
So if there is an existing fracture, a conflict domestically within our relations with one another, whether they do this with the elections. Anything that is an institution that builds our civil society, builds, they don't have to, they'll let us do it. They'll just inch it along.
Right.
They'll you know, whenever the snowball comes to a ledge and stops accumulating ice or snow, they'll pop up behind and give it a little boop, and
Right.
down the other edge of the ledge it goes and gathers more. It's about letting us destroy ourselves. They study us extensively. So when I say that they're behind everything, now there are some things that they do where they initiate, where they're the catalyst.
Right.
But that's not really where they get the most bang for their buck. It's using our own crap against ourselves.
Yeah, and I feel like there are times when they go, when they overreach, that there's an immediate backlash that it doesn't land in the society. The perfect kind of way to fuck with things is you throw in something and you let it simmer for a very long time. And the example I would give, and this is more of a Chinese example than a Russian one, but I don't doubt that it goes hand in glove, is TPP. So during the complaints about NAFTA, many of which are legitimate, a few of which are overblown by both sides, and then they've carried it on as this way of griping against whatever your boogeyman is. You can project it into NAFTA at one point. That our feelings about NAFTA colored every other deal that was possibly made. And TPP was meant to be a bulwark against Chinese industrial hegemony in the South China Seas and the surrounding area, where they were literally muscling everybody out through subterfuge. They were sending their own spies in, a lot of industrial espionage and that kind of stuff, undermining the productive capabilities of the countries around them so that they could grow and be the only, the big boss in town, if not the only boss in town. And TPP set out to undermine that, to basically go, all right, you can build whatever the fuck you want to build, but we're going to make the little extra effort with these other countries that you're trying to stiff arm to do business with them, so that that'll give them that whatever leg up you're taking, whatever leg sweep you're trying to do, will give them a leg up and kind of even it out. And it's up to them whether they're a productive partner or whatever, but we're going to have a direct deal with them so we don't have to deal with you as the only guy in town, the only, and in doing that, the response against TPP wasn't based on, oh, well, I've got a problem with Cambodia being a part of this versus Japan, or South Korea and Japan, are they really on the same team as the Philippines and all this other stuff? And is there a way, are we ever going to reach this thing where China's going to give away this, and will this ratchet up tension about Taiwan? It was never about any of the things that you might have as a legit criticism, or even as a detail you would want to work out, right, in this. It was always just trade deals bad. And it doesn't matter who's making them. NAFTA scars were so strong that they were like, we're not doing this anymore. That's an example, I would argue, of a Russian long game that played into the hands of other people who had, strange bedfellows in some cases, or fellow travelers in others, where they found a wedge thing, and you could drive that wedge in, and it actually fit. It was a wedge that stuck, and it's still here to some degree. I mean, you could argue that the no foreign wars, no endless wars, no forever wars, that languaging sounds great from a peacenik standpoint or a fiscal conservative. It sounds like the same, like, okay, we may disagree about the why of it, but we both agree that we shouldn't be involved in these things, whatever. Which in reality is the result that we're not engaged in quote-unquote forever wars? No, it means the Palestinians are getting obliterated, and Trump is just rolling back. What they mean on the right is, let's take out all the rules of engagement. The only thing slowing this shit down and making these things last a long time is all this bullshit about civilian life. Fuck that. If we're going to bomb somebody, let's just fucking wipe them out. And if we're not going to wipe them out, let them do whatever they want to whoever's nearby unless somebody pays us to be there, which is Trump's basic idea that we should be in a protection racket for the Saudis or anybody else. But
all true. I'll agree with all of that, but I'll take it even one step further. In that things like TPP or TTIP, which was kind of the Atlantic version of that,
right,
or even Brexit, was an attempt by government to deal with globalization. Globalization is going to happen. It has happened. We can get avocados from Israel in a supermarket in Santa Monica pretty darn quick.
Right.
Maybe not the best example, but you get my meaning.
Almonds.
And that was there you go, sure. And that was for all the reasons that you just perfectly laid out, and I'm not going to add to them. But what I am going to just lay as the cherry on top is now we get globalization by dint of oligarchs.
Yeah, right.
Now we have the rich in Moscow talking to the rich in South Africa who are living in mansions in Palo Alto when they're not, in wherever, Taipei or, take your pick. It's the guys with the money, the oligarchy. They're the ones that now get a shot at defining globalism because it was all kneecap, because it was all, God forbid, one global order and the number of the beast and all that crap.
Well,
so
that goes to the whole idea that there is a whole other country, Oligarchistan, that exists.
Yeah.
And it's like it's a walled city or a gated community for the Trumps of the world. And they go like there was a period where he might have run from that to some degree, but right now there's no shame in it for him or his ilk at all. And so they're not talking about it almost like beating their chest about it because he's got too many of the maggots are broke motherfuckers who live in the in the heartland, and so they can't quite be out as much as they were and as gaudy and gold plated as everything is, but he can hint at it. But the idea is a subtle nod all the time that, look, I'm in a different class than you guys, and I come down and visit you guys. The emperor has come down to see us all. I don't know if you know this, but if you're ever in China, if you ever are in Taiwan, or heck, the next time you're in Chinatown and you're at a real Chinese restaurant and somebody pours your tea, knock on the table with these two knuckles as a way of saying thank you. It's a standard kind of cultural thing. Just you tap on your knuckles on the thing, and some people do two fingers, but the proper way is the two knuckles, right? So where's that come from? That comes from a story about the emperor in, I want to say, the Qing dynasty, but he wanted to see he was like 15 years old, and he wanted to see what the real world was like. And I'm going to blitz this for time, but he basically ordered 4 of his guards to give him some regular clothes, and we're going to sneak out and just go eat with the common people. So they went to this restaurant, tea house, opera house place in Beijing, and you can go there to this day. It's a shadow of its former self. It's like a fucking Hard Rock Cafe now, but the building is technically the same building. And you go in there, and when they were the culture is that when I'm out of tea, I don't pour myself some tea. I make sure everybody else is filled, and then I pour my own. Right? I've always loved that aspect of like Chinese tea culture. It's very nice. It's a way to like bring everybody at the table in. Okay, it's great. And when somebody does that for you, you knock on the table with your 2 fingers. Okay, where did that come from? Well, when he brought these 4 soldiers who are raised from children to think the imperial leader is a god, to think the emperor is, the sun shines out of his ass and he's perfect in every way, even when they're studying his poop to see if he's got a stomach bug in a little pot while everybody's standing around looking at his shit, which was a job for like 9 people, right? These guys have been trained to never look him in the eye, much less let him serve them tea. So when he did it, because they're trying to fit in, he picks up the teapot when he wanted tea, so that they would look like locals. He starts pouring the tea for these guys, and one of them started shaking so much the emperor leaned across and was like, "Dude, calm the fuck down or you're going to get us all killed. If they realize who we are, these assholes are going to murder us. You guys will be able to take a few of them out, but we're all dead. Do you understand? Like, every gripe ever is going to come up all at once, and I'm a dead man. So calm the fuck down. And so when he poured for the sergeant at arms of the group that he was with, the guy who was really the leader, when he poured it for him, that guy knocked on the table with his knuckles, which was to symbolize his knees hitting the floor, which is what you're supposed to do when he looks your direction. You're supposed to put your knees on, drop to your knees and look down. So he did that as a symbol of that thing. Okay, so you knocked out. So I tell the story because that's the nature of MAGA. That they view him as empirical, like as an emperor, as as this kind of fictional, like mythical figure in a lot of ways. And I say myth because it's bullshit. But the idea is that it matters to them, his worth in the world, no matter how much it falls apart, no matter how much it turns out to be bullshit, no matter how he couldn't solve a fucking peace deal in an hour on a phone call or any of that nonsense. It's never his fault. If only the Tsar knew, right? Is the Russian version of that. Like, or if the Tsar only knew. Like,
no, yeah, I got a better one, but I don't know.
Yeah.
It's another bit of a long story, but
I don't care.
Yeah,
it's worthwhile. But
well,
the point is, like,
okay.
when MAGA turns,
Yeah, okay.
when those people turn on you, when those people finally go, this was all bullshit, that's when shit gets really fucking dark. It's not the people like even the Antifa, black bloc folks. It's not, Democrats who will, wearing pussy hats, walking down the street that he has to worry about. It's the Jan 6ers. If they ever turn on him, it's fucking game over. And that's why they always do these clean sweeps. That's why Putin does this. With they'll purge the people who were probably most responsible for the revolution when it happens, because those are the first people who go, wait a minute, we were supposed to do this. And that's what's happening in a lesser sense with this budget right now. It's the Freedom Caucus that's shutting this shit down, right? That's always going to be a problem with the true believers. So tell us the Tsar story. Tell us the Tsar story, because yeah.
So the Tsar story isn't directly applicable, but there is an aspect to the MAGA relationship with the between the emperor and the MAGA faithful. Right. And it's the story from it's apocryphal. So a czar.
Yeah.
A czar wants to build, let's say it was Ivan. Generally, they go with Ivan, who built the Church of the Spilt Blood on Red Square.
Sounds so good. Wait a minute, that sounds sounds like a Slayer album. The Church of the Spilt Blood on Red Square.
Actually,
Jesus Christ.
Well,
that's amazing.
Anyhow, so the architect, or somebody who's done this great favor for the Tsar, comes to the Tsar and he says, I've done this great thing for you. And the Tsar says, yes, you had. That's right. As a gift, I'll give you anything you want. If it's in my power, I'll give it to you no matter what. And the guy says, I want a letter from you saying that no matter what writing in I go into, that I will always be able to eat and drink for free. Mm-hmm. And the Tsar goes, it's done. So the guy, of course, on his travels, within about 6 months, goes into a place and drinks himself into a stupor and loses the piece of paper. So then he goes back to the Tsar and he says,
yeah,
Your Highness, blah-dee-dee, yada-dee, yada-dee.
Yeah.
I lost the paper. Could I get another one? And the Tsar goes, hold him down. And he gets a tattooist to tortuously write the letter, that he had given to him, by dint of the highest Tsar of the great Rush, the leader of the people of the Rus, conqueror of all down his fucking neck. And so to this day in Russia, if somebody's been drinking heavily or wants to drink heavily, you just tap on your neck like that. So it kind of loses its meaning. But what I take from that story as an American is a little bit more in depth and cute than like tap your neck if you want to get drunk in Russia. This is an example of the Kremlin, the Tsar, the exalted on high, um, I'm, you know, I administer my power to you, and if you displease me, or if it does not suit my, I'm going to make an example of you, or I'm going to, like, by dint of, like, you have abused my graciousness, sort of thing. So there's a little of that in this Trump relationship of, like, oh, my great King Trump, please, shower us with,
Yes.
the scraps off your table, and we are not worthy, but we'll come back for your largesse so that we can be amongst it. And
Yeah.
it's some deep
It,
rooted, and they've always been with us. They've
right.
always been with us.
Right. And
It's the
it
guys who don't have any real concept of what the Constitution was really all about, that have this God King worship of him.
mm-hmm. Well, and the issue that you have with somebody like that, in the same way that you have that issue with Putin or any other dictator or something like that, is that not only are those his main supporters, those are his only true supporters. That nobody really would choose this in a jump ball situation, right? That's why it's crazy that Trump is back in power, but it's also, why they have to hold on to it so in such a draconian nature. So because and again, once those people are out, fucking yikes. Once those people find a new, mega church pastor or whatever, or they turn on you, it gets really scary really quickly. So I guess where we start with in terms of what was going on in the Russia-Ukraine back and forth, the conversation. And by the way, everybody, just so you know, check out Phil's show On the Edge, but also Natalie Ziemba is going to be joining me after Phil today. I'm going to go an extra half hour because she couldn't do the first hour, so she's going to jump on after that to talk about some Chicago and local politics and some countrywide politics that we're dealing with. So hang in there after Phil leaves us to go back to waiting for Mark Hamill to tell him to get out of the way. But there are a couple things. One is Trump had this 2-hour phone call. And part of me calls bullshit on it. The idea that he was on the phone for 2 hours straight talking to Vladimir Putin about this stuff, I find ridiculous. I think.
Oh, I could think it could go on for 2 hours. No, I absolutely think it could between naps.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. Like that he
while the actual adults in the room,
right,
who actually make shit happen, bicker amongst themselves for 15 minutes, and then they go, "Oh, Mr. President, we cannot agree to that." And he goes, "Oh, okay. Well, then how about this?" And then they bicker for 15 minutes. Or the Russians go to the White House and say, and Rubio and fucking, whoever else is involved in it, they bicker for 15 minutes. Sure, that could go for 2 hours easily. But a full-on conversation? Forget it.
Right. Well, that's the thing. And in this conversation, like, I feel like he said 2 hours. They talked for 2 hours. And we find out he talked to Western leaders as well. So I think the whole, like, afternoon of calls was 2 hours all in, with other people making phone calls and him being in on 9 minutes of it here or 12 minutes of it here. Now, the difference, Biden had these calls with Xi Jinping where he's on fucking screen. Like, you want to talk about massive transparency? Here's Biden for the entire length of the call, and you can watch the fucking thing. They're releasing it, Whereas Trump, it's like, no, trust me. I was on the phone with him for 2 hours. Oh, we reminisced about so much. I can't even get into how much we talked about. And then you find out it's like fucking Hamas Abi's, detention at the airport in Chicago. Like, he was detained for 2 hours. Well, your plane landed at 4:30, and you were out of the airport by 5:30, and standing in line is about a half hour, and then you waited for at least 20 minutes. It seems like they talked to you for like 7 minutes and then let you go. So I don't know about detention. This seems to be a similar bullshit story from Trump, right? 2 hours was everybody involved. But ultimately, what was the end result of it? Trump walking away frustrated with no win, no concessions. As far as I can see, Russia didn't give anything, right?
No, no,
So,
and they're not going to.
hmm
They're not
so
going to. They don't want to stop the war.
no. And why would they?
So
Also, it seems to be that
why
like
would they?
according to like while he was talking to European leaders, apparently he was just like parroting JD Vance's bullshit that well, Russia's going to win anyways.
Mm-hmm.
This nonsense we've heard from Marjorie Taylor Greene. Like, I got news for you. If they were going to win, they would have won already. If they're that capable of winning, if it was guaranteed, like you're talking about, if it's an inevitability, they would have won already. Finland has just decided to give 1% of their GDP, their military budget, to Ukraine till the end of the war.
Not just that.
Yeah, I mean, there's
Not
other
just
stuff.
that.
Right.
They also just agreed. Well, no, importantly, they also just agreed to. I believe it was a 10 billion euro,
Mm-hmm.
uh, I guess loan or grant
Mm-hmm.
from seized Russian assets. I mean, we've had a couple of precedents. The Canadians have kind of done this before, but to have the Finns do it, it's just not specifically that it's the Finns, but to have another country going, you know what? Yeah, let's take some of this Russian money and fund the Ukrainians to defend against Russian aggression. So
well, and also
that's going to happen. Hal, that's
agreed.
going to happen.
Yeah.
We are one or two nations away from crossing the Rubicon, and everybody will go. Now, I heard recently somebody with a very good idea saying, let's not give them the 300 billion immediately. Let's do it incrementally and say to the Russians, for every month that you don't come to the table, we're going to give $10 billion more to the Ukrainians from the seized money. You have 30 months.
Yeah.
And see what happens. I thought that was a really thoughtful idea.
Yeah, I agree too. And part of the stuff with Finland, I might remind everybody, is that Russia has started building up near Finland's border. Now, they always kind of have, but and again, this seems more performative than anything. I don't see them attacking a NATO country, even with Donald Trump being, the world's flabbiest nunt in the world about this whole thing. But they're clearly parking some stuff over there. Now, I think the reason that they're parking those things there is to avoid getting struck. If like Ukraine is not going to want to fire stuff up near the border of Finland unless they have a Poland situation like they had with that missile that went awry last year or the year before. I lose track. But they've been the story is they've been beefing up bases and building military infrastructure near the Finnish border, according to recent satellite imagery and moves that could reveal their strategy of what happens after the Ukraine war. Which I don't think so. The idea that they're gonna finish off Ukraine and then go into Finland, and then the United States is going to react the same way, that JD Vance will go, hey, Finland's not our friend. Like it'll get bad real quick. I don't see Russia being able to win in that circumstance, but I think it's largely performative, and it's safer to build that stuff up than put it near Belarus or near their own border where it'll get hit with a drone. So the idea is that maybe Finland's anti-aircraft or anti-UAW stuff that they have might knock stuff out of the way, automatically.
There's better transport. So you could send it out to Siberia, I suppose. But the transport, because they always use rail to really move their armor, they use rail. And while there are arterial lines of railway going east in Russia, you're better to go north-south in European Russia, because it's not quite as like you need to rely on a single line that we can keep open year-round all the way out to Vladivostok, which actually doesn't exist. But regardless, they have these massive arterial lines, as I say, going up and down from St. Petersburg to Rostov and the staging area for Ukraine, you have options galore. You can move a lot more, a lot faster because you have those options. There's less threat to those lines being struck. So yeah, I mean, you're not going to invade the Kola Peninsula
No.
in Finland with that kind of, as impressive as that seems to be. You're not going to invade Finland with that kind of a size force. Hell, they can't take Ukraine. They're not going to take Finland and Ukraine. They're not going to wait until the other option of like ultimately they'll do something after Ukraine. Right. Bollocks. Yeah, no, not going to happen. None of that is going to happen.
Right.
It's all performative. They're losing this war badly. The fact that JD Vance doesn't know that. The fact that they're clutching at their pearls at like, oh my goodness, maybe Moscow isn't negotiating in good faith. Wake up, buddy. Where you been? It's John McClane throwing the fucking, what is it? What does he throw out the window? It hits the cop car. Wake up! Welcome to the party, buddy.
Pal, it's one of the guys.
It's the body. One of the guys tied up.
On a chair.
He's tied up. He's duct taped to the chair. Ho ho ho! All that good stuff.
That's the guy. Ho is the guy in the elevator.
That's the other guy. Too many dead bodies. John McClane, you're a beast.
Yeah. So, and the other thing too is I honestly I don't want to let this slide with this idea that JD Vance doesn't understand. JD Vance very much understands that without us supporting Russia, literally supporting them, not just not supporting Ukraine, but letting Russia back into the financial system, relieving sanctions, and then going into business with them, buying and selling shit, namely oil from them and the like. Without us helping Russia back on its feet, it will lose. So this like oversimplified idea that, and this is from the from New York Times, I think, or whatever. But on his flight back from Rome, JD Vance gave journalists a desk read of a script that's been in development about the Trump administration's claim to be working to end Russia's war against Ukraine. The script is dressed up in the language of diplomacy, realism, and restraint. It talks about impasse, mistrust, and the need to move on. It pretends to search for peace, but the script is lousy, and there's not a word of truth in it. The push for peace talks isn't about ending the war. It's about ending Ukraine's resistance. It's all about creating the illusion that diplomacy is being pursued so that they can walk away. That way, Putin can be handed a victory without anyone having to say the word surrender. The talks have been proceeding for a little while. We realize there's a bit of an impasse here. First of all, fuck you, impasse. He said he'd solve it in one phone call. He knew exactly what he would say to both people, and it would end it super fast. And it wasn't a joke, and it wasn't something you could throw away, and you don't get to walk it back. I won't allow it. It's not allowed. I'm saying no. Everybody goes, no. You don't get to walk back that you said you could solve this immediately. You can't. You are lying. And so everybody else that you were shitting on who had a plan to actually deal with this in a realistic sense, you owe them an apology. I don't want to hear this shit about fake news. You want to know fake news? Fake news is you saying and insisting that people quote you in papers saying I could end this in a one phone call. That's fake news. This is fake news. This whole
lie.
We're trying very hard, but we're in an impasse. Like it's a new thing.
Yeah, surprise, surprise. It's complicated. But JD Vance's, and I don't know which of these is true, whether or not JD Vance's clear hatred of Europe, which has been demonstrated time and time again, gives him a blind spot to what a Russian victory in Ukraine will mean for the continent, and as a ripple effect to transatlantic trade. And it will change, the transatlantic economic structure. It will, we will not be dealing with capitals in Western Europe that are, yes, part of a European Union, but who we can streamline things because of the European for trade. We will be dealing with a continent that will be under constant threat from Moscow and therefore compromised by Moscow. So I don't know if it's a blind spot or if he really does want Europe, if that is actually if he is conscious of the ramifications of a Russian success. I don't even want to say victory in Ukraine. that what the ramifications, does he want Europe destroyed, or is he so blind to the ramifications of what'll happen
Right.
because of his hatred of Europe that he's ignorant of the ripple effect that will hurt us? It
Yeah.
will, if Europe becomes under the thumb
Yeah.
of Moscow, which doesn't mean tanks in
Mm-mm.
Paris. It means oligarchy, kleptocracy. It means the constant threat that
Mm-hmm.
will loom above Europe. So Europe will bend the knee to Moscow.
Oh yeah.
But what that will mean for everything in the Western, world, where there are very strong and lucrative ties for both sides of the relationship. Is he that fucking stupid? Is he that fucking, like, willfully ignorant? Is he that hateful of Europe? I don't know what it is, but it's short-sighted as hell to
Yeah.
think that let's just even with all the lucrative deals they think that they can make with the Russian Federation alleviated from the sanctions. And I call that into question too. I think we get more benefit from a strong Europe that includes Ukraine than we do with any deal we're going to get out from a bunch of thugs who rip, fossil fuels from the ground and certain
Right.
rare minerals, but
Yeah.
have nothing else to offer us.
Right.
I would rather go with Europe. Thank you very
And
much.
and who are
That
running out
includes
of it because
Ukraine.
again, like the Saudis are. I would argue the Saudis are faced with a really difficult issue that we have not seen since the fall of Imperial Japan, which is a transition from a monarchical, spiritual, religious structure for your government, shifting to a technological one. Japan post World War II, I don't think people grasp. And again, I want to reference people to like what the Japanese did in China and what they did to POWs and the kind of like North Korean style attitude they had about their leadership in World War II. I think people have forgotten the depth of that. As part and parcel because of the unconditional surrender, because we've been such partners with them ever since. But that shift was nothing short of miraculous. That they went from that kind of being, but they also had one benefit, and that was it wasn't a religion based on they had a religious belief in their emperor, but it wasn't a religion shared by the surrounding countries. So it wasn't that North Korea and China and all these guys believed in their leader too, or it was like a form of Buddhism that made their guy magical. The way the mullahs in Iran are different from the Sunni and Shia split in Iran and Saudi Arabia, for example, which is the same religion and competing factions over who's the real strand, right? That's the issue that's there. And so it will be harder for MBS and the Saudi royal family to move into kind of the gentrified modern life of monarchies than it was for the Japanese. But that's the task. There is no other future but that. They're out of oil for all practical purposes. They are not the biggest producer anymore. They're not going to be. They have seen the end of that. They are cash poor in a lot of ways. They have dialed back their spending for all the relatives of the royal family and kicked a bunch of them off a rooftop so they don't have to pay them anymore. And he's trying to turn them into this tourist state in the middle of a fucking dumpster fire around him, right? So, but so if you're looking for an investment, there was a period to which nobody would have trusted investment from Japan post World War II for a couple of decades until they started making cars and Honda put its plant in. I think in Hawthorne, in that general area down by the airport in Los Angeles. And it made those kind of moves. There was still a lot of bad blood, like Germany and Europe, right? It took a long time to work that shit out. And that was without a religious war being fought on their doorstep. Like after Germany fell and think of how long it took for the Berlin Wall to come down and the back and forth between that shit. What's happening in Saudi Arabia is an inevitable aspect of modernization of human life on the planet. And there are people who definitely want to set that back because they know they're the losers in it. I would argue that the mullahs in Iran are like Elon Musk wanting his paws on AI. Well, guys, we got to stop doing this modernization stuff. Why? Because we have to have time to catch up. You guys are way ahead of us. That's, it's not because they really don't want it for them, or they want it for themselves and not anybody else. And that's oligarchistan, like we're talking about, where they want, they want this for all their, their rich friends, but they don't.
Well,
want
and
this for
the
rest of
guys, yeah, the guys who benefit from the status quo are going to go kicking and screaming as well. So add that to the mix.
Right. And especially if it's a religious status quo, which has a depth of intensity that is very different from just having a different economical stand. If you think Marxism, communism, and capitalism have had a rough ride over the last half century, holy shit. I mean, once Sunni and Shia get into the age of AI and drones and modern warfare and all, I mean, the chance for it to go sideways is fucking enormous. So if you're going to put all your eggs in one basket in terms of who you're considering your new friends in the world, which is what Trump did by his trip to Saudi Arabia, and looking away from Europe, where you really do have multiple stable countries in general agreement, all of them already as advanced as need be, and that you could build relationships with that would be equally, if not more lucrative over time. Because as rich as Saudi Arabia is, partly they're like that because it's just like gaudy oil money. You have to spend as fast as it's coming out of the ground, right? And once you start stacking it, somebody can steal it. Whereas long wealth, which is what you see in Europe, has some breadth to it and some depth to it, and you could
developing trade negotiations and regulations and all kinds of diplomatic agreements, and that takes time. And it is, he is a disruptor, and I keep coming back to the fact. I keep coming back to my strong belief, based on a lot of not just belief, but things that I've learned over the years of studying this region.
Right.
It's being done on purpose. They can't match us on the battlefield, but they can actually, tear things down. It's so much easier to tear things down than to build things up. Are we going to, how long is it going to take to rebuild the relationships with Europe? And that's a Europe that presumably comes out of this conflict on top.
I would argue almost instant. If a Democrat comes in and we take control of the House and the Senate again, honest to God, people
but a lot of damage is being done.
Right. Oh, no question. But I would argue that
the Europeans, and the Europeans will also, I have no doubt, say to us, you guys got to get some laws in order, and you got to clean your house so that shit doesn't happen again. I can see the Europeans doing that, and then if we do that, I agree with you. I think the Europeans will come. It's in their interest too.
Right.
But that's not going to happen if Moscow is dominant.
No, not at all. And I also think that Trump thinks trade solves all. And he's of this idea that, look, guys, why are we fighting? We could all be making money. It's like he's like walked into a bar with a cigar in his mouth going, like it's the new gangsters in town. Like it's time for the gangsters that ran Vegas by killing each other to move into fixing the electronic machines in the gambling machines to make more money that way rather than shooting each other. Like he kind of views, or at least Don Jr. does, and I think to some more Eric, they view it as that's their methodology.
Yeah, don't get me wrong. I'm not just talking about trade and regulations. And there's common ground. There's common. No, they are. But I just wanted to clarify that I'm not just talking about that. I am talking about political associations, common cause, geopolitical strategy.
You're talking like a sane person. I'm trying to point out that when it comes to Trump, like on his Truth Social post,
greedy is not very intelligent.
No, it is not. This is something he said in relation to the India-Pakistan thing too. I called him up and said, guys, we got to do trade. We're going to do trade if you calm down. And the idea that India and Pakistan are going to go, fuck this whole Kashmir problem we've had forever. We'll just put it as come on, baby. Cha-ching, is just absurd.
We'll forget all about partition. No problem.
Yeah, exactly. So he goes, Russia wants to do large-scale trade with the United States when this catastrophic bloodbath is over, and I agree. There's a tremendous opportunity for Russia to create massive amounts of jobs and wealth. Says who? Doing what? Its potential is unlimited. No, it's not.
No, it's not.
No, it's not.
By any
There is
stretch of the imagination.
a very low glass ceiling on that society and that economic structure. That like they're bumping their head up
In the
against
21st
fucked
century.
all the time. It's
What
dumb.
do they do? What do they do? They do
Right.
stuff that has been done since time immemorial. Find something in the ground, rip it out, sell it.
Mhm.
The 21st century, I mean, they tried to make a Russian version of Silicon Valley. It was a embarrassment because the second anybody got to a certain global category, the level of competency, they were out of there.
Yeah.
So it's just they don't do anything but this ancient Bronze Age kind of like
Right.
find a vein of tin and pull it out, cut down a bunch of trees and sell it. Whatever the good, whatever we can find on our territory,
Yeah.
rip it out and
The
sell
only
it.
renewable resource in the whole fucking country is
speak of.
vodka. And technologically, it is stunning to me. And this is, I think, the thing that stands out. And this is how you know that as Russia is run right now and how as the society operates, how it has the glass ceiling on top of it. You want to know how I know that's the fucking fact? Is because you don't have a Russian phone or a Russian refrigerator or a Russian flat screen and nobody in Europe does and nobody in fucking China does and nobody and these guys allegedly were toe to toe with the United States technologically speaking in the nuclear race forever, for 50 years, which is the top of technological achievement in many ways. Being able to launch an intercontinental ballistic missile with a nuclear warhead on the top of it, the technology and the science involved in that, you can't fucking figure out how to create your own VR headset or your own laptops or whatever. Like, they've thrown all that shit out the window in the same way that the Saudis, for the longest time, instead of developing the technological base of their society, using all these natural resources that they had, they're playing catch up right now and trying to jump into the 21st century because they just spent it gold plating every fucking thing. They put grills in and we're like, I'm a badass. Like that.
Bought the mega yachts,
Right.
and cruised around Hvar in Croatia, and
And say what you will about the United States and its own internal failures, and we talk about it warts and all here, and we're allowed to or whatever. But if you look at the growth of education in the United States, based on the Industrial Revolution as it came up, and our shift away from tariffs to income tax as a way of paying for that, going, hey, yes, there's a lot of money flowing into the United States. There's a lot of money being made here. There's a lot of growth here. There's a lot of technology here. And that should be shared with all the citizens. They should have, and you want the best and smartest workforce in your tech company and your industry, whatever that is. And you want the car designers of tomorrow to be born here and all that kind of great architects, all that stuff. You want that done here. So it's going to cost something and we should spread that out instead of just fucking painting everything gold for years and then going, oh shit. What's a cell phone? Which is, honest to God, how did that, it boggles my mind. I don't know how the fuck that happened to Russia. I don't know. How are they that behind when they were allegedly, and again, as they say in Finland, Russia's never as strong as it looks and never as weak as it looks. But
true. Well, they love to point out that they beat us to space. They put Yuri Gagarin in orbit before us. They'll tell you that.
I'll tell you what. Bullshit. How about that? How about I just flat out call bullshit on that? I'll tell you, this part drives me crazy too. We've been taking their word for that for years. And you know who planted most of the stories that we faked the fucking moon landing all over the world? The fucking Russians. And it sounds a lot like... Absolutely. They have been the biggest they're the guys with the badminton racket keeping that shuttlecock of bullshit in the fucking sky forever. If you don't have to dig very deep to find Russian money behind any of these kind of America has never done anything impressive, So while first of all, I don't believe that bullshit as much as they try to sell it. So why the fuck am I going to take their word for it? At this point, prove it. No. We know, the Americans went up there. The entire fucking world was watching. When they did it, hey, we already did it. Here's a piece of film. Check us or wreck yourself.
You can bounce a laser off the moon.
Yeah.
Because of it.
Right.
It's proof. You can prove it.
Ugh.
I know. I know
so
it's
fucking aggravating.
infuriating, and
It's so fucking
so
aggravating. But and it's lazy.
yeah,
And that's the other thing. It's
it's
like,
lazy.
again, the biggest thing about Russia, and the biggest question they would have to answer for me, is how the fuck could you guys be toe to toe with America, the biggest economy in the world, in military advancements and in optics and all this kind of stuff? Like I've shown this before, but I have my Blackmagic camera that I use has I bought some like 16 millimeter Russian lenses that off of eBay because you can buy them really cheap because they made they made millions of them. Why? For surveillance of their own people. But after it fell in 91, they've got these buckets of fucking lenses, and they're all gorgeous lead-coated, well-machined lenses for 16 millimeter cameras that, if you paid for what they were if you try to find an American one, they sold at market level. But these guys just printed the fucking things because they needed one for every citizen, right? And so they're great. How do you go from that, being able to mass produce these like kind of amazing lenses? They're all lead coated glass, so they have bokeh in them that's really beautiful and all this. Like, they're really nice. Some of them are shit and they're moldy because of where they were kept, and you have to throw them out. But some of them, you just buy bulk. Anyways, point being is, how do you go from there to this shit? How do you fail so badly? Oh, Natalie is waiting in the wings.
Well, no small part of it's going to be the corruption and the kleptocracy.
Yeah. Well, that would be it. There you go. And that's why you
Huge
fight
part of it.
corruption. That's why, if there's a better reason to fight corruption, like the kind that Trump and his fucking plane and his stupid crypto and all this stuff, if there's no better way for the United States to effectively become Russia, a resource-based economy that produces nothing of worth in the world, than to allow corruption to just run roughshod over everything. That's it.
Empower your population and fight corruption.
That's right. That's what we got to do.
That's how we avoid becoming Russia.
So saith Philip Bittner. So thanks very much.
Yeah.
I'll see you on Saturday, brother.
See you on Saturday. We filmed today the interview that will be airing on Sunday. We had about an hour-long conversation with the senior advisor to President in exile, Svetlana Tikhanovskaya from Belarus.
Excellent.
So he's her chief advisor. So we got to talk about a whole bunch of issues regarding Lukashenko and Putin, Belarus's role within the war, both in terms of Russia and Ukraine and Europe. So we have yet to start the edit process, but that's who we have this week, and it's a good get.
Excellent. Well, thanks, brother. Appreciate it. I will see you on Saturday, and have a great show on Sunday, and we'll talk to you later. Excellent.
All right, man. Take it easy.
Thank you. And the lovely and talented Natalie Ziemba is waiting in the wings, and I'm going to bring her in just 1 second. In 3, 2, 1. There she is. Hi.
Hi. Can you hear me okay?
Oh, I totally can hear you. Wow, that's okay. That's it's very loud, and that's a good thing. Okay, excellent. So Nat's on the city council in Woodstock, Illinois, but Nat's also been a booster, I would say, of both myself and Stephanie Miller and everybody on our side of the media sphere for quite some time before she kind of started. She put her, she made the rubber meet the road. She put her, she got up and did the work, and she ended up getting elected to city council. And I have told her, and I will say it again in front of God and everyone, that it's just a matter of scale. You did city council, you can do state representative, you can do senator, and even President Ziemba. Now, I understand that most people, Republicans will react very difficult. It won't matter. By that time, they will have eaten their own. So you've got years before you need to do it. You're in no rush. You're as a spring chicken. So first of all, hi, welcome. It's your first time on the show.
It is. Thanks for having me. This is amazing.
Yeah, it's a good time. So I think in talking to you, like, one of the things I think you and I can talk about, because you deal with this, and we mentioned this when you so wonderfully came on the show with Karen from Chicago on when I was doing the WCPT weekend, and there are a lot of things about city council where a lot of what you're doing is you're marking up expenditures and trying to figure out how you're going to spend the budget, where it's going to go, and whether it's being effective and all that kind of stuff. And that's what's happening currently in the House while these guys are eating themselves. And I don't know how much you've been paying attention to the great, big, beautiful bill but it's getting
Right.
smaller and becoming like two marginally attractive medium-sized bills to possibly five grotesque monstrosities. I don't,
Right.
Um, uh, has anything stuck out to you besides the fact that they're repealing the tax on silencers?
Well, you were mentioning salt earlier,
Mm-hmm.
and so, things like that affect municipalities. I'm obviously in Illinois, and so we are one of the what I would call a donor state, right?
Yep.
So we're one of those states like California that we put money back in, uh, you know,
Mm-hmm.
because we have sometimes these surpluses of tax, so we pay in more than we take out when you
Mm-hmm.
talk about circulating it throughout the federal tax system. So
Right.
you start talking about that, but my biggest concern is somebody that thinks about community and the care of people and society.
What kind
And
of madness
i'm
is this? Right.
I know is things, the cuts that are there that are being proposed. But we start looking at again the 2017 extension of the tax cut. Well,
Mm-hmm.
to people who aren't paying attention, what does that really mean? On its surface, it seems, wow, I'm going to get a tax cut, right? As it just an
Mm-hmm.
everyday person. But what we forget is, like somebody is getting taxed the same amount as somebody that's making, let's say $500,000 is making $60,000. And so
Mm-hmm.
what are we doing to help people that I still think that there's a dissolution, we're dissolving the true middle class.
Yeah.
And what happens to those people, and cutting things like VA benefits, um, social security is under threat, Medicare, Medicaid, all of these things, they're talking, these proposals being put forward of cutting,
Right.
taking a it's not even a scalpel anymore. It's taking a machete to very important critical pieces of, and I do not like the word entitlement. These are, most
Mm-hmm.
oftentimes, right, temporary benefits,
Yeah.
that people have paid into and are
Correct.
deserving of. So it's, to
Mm-hmm.
me, it's like a crime against humanity of what is happening right now. So I'm really scared. I'm scared for people just within my own community
Right.
who are feeling it, and they're scared too.
Yeah.
So
Well, okay.
that's just,
So,
the human side of me speaking,
of
because am
course.
I paying attention? Yeah, I am paying attention, but there's only so much, at the federal level. What can we do? We hold no reasonable power as Democrats,
Yeah.
right? We're outnumbered. And
Mm-hmm.
so this is what happens. Elections are so important. And you speak about this. I can beat the drum constantly about this, how important from the
Mm-hmm.
bottom up, right? I spoke about this when we saw each other a few Saturdays ago, at the WCPT event. Bottom up,
Mm-hmm.
municipalities, school boards, your city councils, those of us that have things like township elections, all the way
Yeah.
up now to, state level, your state houses and your state senate. Then you start working your way up into we love to get ourselves involved in federal, right? Because that's where we think about more social issues and these big, social policy issues and things.
Mm-hmm.
You can't get there until you build an infrastructure and a framework at the local level, up on through. I speak about this too, concentric circles working their way from local to state all the way out
Yeah.
to the federal level.
Yeah.
And
And
we
there.
already know, I mean, in 2 years, things could look very different. Here in Illinois, Dick Durbin has made his announcement. Jan Schakowsky has made her announcement. Who are we putting up? I'm very excited about, some of the things that I'm already seeing and hearing. So I'm
Mm-hmm.
looking forward to probably doing some door knocking, some phone banking, however I can help. That's what we need people to do is get out there, get active, activate. We feel really good when we go to these rallies, right? I don't even call them protests anymore. We get
Right.
excited by going to rallies because we are doing something, we're active. All right, take the next step. How can you help people at the local, municipal, and state level get into these offices? And then
Right.
people like a Senator Durbin. Do I, it's time, right? He knows it.
Mhm.
Who are we putting up there to get into that seat? So
And currently,
I
we're
know I'm
looking at
all over the place.
no, no, not. I mean, there's a lot
That's
to
the way my
cover. That's
brain
the
works.
yeah, right. Well, you and I both know, like, we deal with this whole thing of like, there is so much going on at any given time. You can prioritize. All of it's worthy of prioritizing. It's just a matter of how much hard drive space you have and what your main focus on, where you think you can actually do the most good at the time. That's also a big portion of it too. Like, how can we move the ball forward
Right.
in this particular area, because it's on everybody's mind, and so people are, there's a groundswell about this. The ACA is a good example of that. I think Republicans are, quite frankly, shitting the bed on their bill, because they are two divergent groups that make up the kind of crucial swing vote that they need to get this bill passed. One is the machete slash and burn types. These are the
Yeah.
people who don't care what they want to cut, just as long as they cut it so they can give this tax breakaway. And then there's other folks that have to get elected in purple districts. And those people know that if they lose, a Democrat's going to come in there, and that Democrat is never going to vote with Republicans on this kind of stuff ever. They might be 60-40 even themselves, but if they're replaced by a Democrat, that Democrat is not going to walk down the aisle with these guys on these kind of cuts ever. So they're trying to cut at the margins and bring it down within some sort of acceptable level. But the reality is they're punting off the cost of this for 8 years. So they got a 10-year arc of how much this thing will pay for, and it gradually gets worse over time. So it would be in the middle of the next Democrat who's in office, or certainly after Trump has left. The idea that you can tell he's not going to run for another term, and this whole third term bullshit is ridiculous. You can tell he's not going to, because of how this deal is structured. It's structured to lay the groundwork for the damage, like people realizing the damage over the course of a few years. So the issue goes that if we're building that structure in that same amount of time, where the SALT tax, for example, gives blue states the ability to reclaim a lot of their donor money for these red states, those cuts don't end up hurting in 6 years in those red states. They don't run out of funds then. They start running out in 2. They start running out, in some cases immediately if they're emergency funds. We just had this, the tornadoes in Kentucky and Missouri and Tennessee, and 18 people killed in Kentucky, 19, I think. And this kind of idea, like that we can just slash and burn FEMA, and we can slash and burn Medicaid and Medicare, all the people who are affected by life, the one thing the government is set up to do. And I think maybe you could speak to that a little bit, because there are things that businesses do well, and those are the optional things in life. If things are optional, including, I would argue, to some degree, gasoline, you can stay home. Like, there's an element of if you can't walk to the store or ride a horse there, I guess you could. People used to. You can move closer to the store, I suppose, right? But companies do optional stuff. Is a cell phone necessary for modern life? Yes. Is it necessary for life? No. There's you don't have to.
There's workarounds.
Yes, there's workarounds all the time. Exactly. But when your back's up against the wall, and you have a child with a disability, and you can't afford not just child care, but home health care for this kid who's on a ventilator or in a wheelchair or those kind of things, and you're living at home, and the child income tax credit wouldn't, even at the max that Democrats want to give it to, wouldn't go far enough. It's when Medicaid, Medicare, and SSDI and all these kind of things protect you in those circumstances. When a tornado comes through, when a hurricane comes through, when a flood happens, these are times when just there's no human being that could push back the walls of water themselves, and there's no company that could go, there's a profit in rolling in here and helping people rebuild, without funds coming from somewhere, and it won't be the people whose house was washed away, right? So Democrats are all about, like, government has to be as big as the challenge you face. That's how big government has to be. And if people are saying, oh my God, the challenges are so big, then that's an argument for bigger government to me. You need to make sure that these things are handled by people who aren't in it to turn a profit, but to save lives, improve lives, and protect freedoms.
Yeah. Absolutely. And it's what I would call like a protective barrier, right? And I'll go back to I'll take a personal example here for a moment. I lost my dad to Alzheimer's in 2019. my family and we banded together, right? We believed in care in place. We
Mm-hmm.
were fortunate enough to say, if we can take care of dad in the home ourselves, right? Not bringing in outside care, not bringing in caregivers or nurses into the home, but if we can care for him as long as possible,
Mm-hmm.
it's just better. Research proves that, right? If you can do that,
Yep.
it's just better. It keeps the routine. It
Mm-hmm.
keeps, the closeness and
Personal
the sense
connection.
of bonding. Absolutely. And for somebody going through dementia, that's very important. Well, it got to the tipping point. There was no way we could care for him at home anymore because one of us was going to get hurt lifting him or, transferring him, etc. So the only way possible my father was able to get care was he was a Medicaid patient.
Mm-hmm.
So, my parents, there's not like a ton of assets. You don't go into private pay or private care unless you have assets for which they can draw down.
Yeah.
So the transition for my dad as a Medicaid recipient was fairly easy
Mm-hmm.
because I, as an advocate, was able to help, right, transition and be his
Mm-hmm.
advocate, his liaison, so to speak. Again, very fortunate that we were able to do that. But the care he received, because he was a Medicaid patient, is nowhere near what he would have been able to receive. So how do you make a choice now to say, well, no more of that Medicaid money. We can't afford. We're not going to give somebody like John Ziemba
Mm-hmm.
that portion of money. I mean, it comes down to that. And I'm always
Yeah.
going to speak to things at a microcosmic. If you can make things as personal as you can, as small as you can, it's not until it affects an individual or a family that people seem to care, right? So it's when these cuts start happening, this just machete taken to
Mm-hmm.
things, and you start slicing things away, these protective barriers. When we had the hurricanes, when those dramatic storms happened last year and just sort of swept through the South, the Midwest and the
Mm-hmm.
South and headed southeast, it was almost like people were taking to the streets to say, hey, Biden administration, where are you? Why are you not visiting? Where's all the FEMA money?
Mm-hmm.
Where are those same people now?
Right. Well,
Protesting and angry and
on
frustrated.
agreed. On top of that, though, I would argue
So
that the money under Biden was coming, and it was largely performative from those very same people. And the
exactly.
reason they're
And
not doing it
here's
now,
the
yeah.
difference. Here's the difference, right? Biden didn't have to get on, or, his press secretary didn't have to get on TV or radio or Fox News every day, every moment, preaching from the rooftops, here's how we're helping. Democrats do it a little differently. We just help, we sort of come in,
Yep.
we do the work that has to be done, and I call it quiet progressivism, right?
Mm-hmm.
And this is now very loud.
Mm-hmm.
I hate to use populism, but that's how it's being couched, right? It's this
Right.
loud, very abrupt, very in your face, constant barrage of information, even if it's incorrect. It's like, well, at least they're telling us something.
Right, right. Yeah, well, that again, in an emergency and in those kind of situations, there does have to be what I would say a bullhorn moment, and that's the lesson learned, I think, from 9/11 and Bush standing on the rubble, just saying stuff through the bullhorn. Was it effective what he did going into Iraq and Afghanistan? Of course not. It was ridiculous. But that moment set a tone for himself to ride that illusion of being on the ground and working with it. The bravado of being such a dick that you would even think to say something like that through a bullhorn in that moment, like it was the end of Independence Day, is something that's anathema to a lot of Democrats. But in reality, that sets up a narrative that you can coast on or control. Obama was fairly good at some of those kind of things, but he was kneecapped coming in by the 2008 crash. They knew they had him behind the eight ball, and you can't request national health care if your economy has just collapsed. Where's the tax base going to come from for it? Blah blah blah. How would you do this? So, but I would say I think we could both agree that Democrats, without I'll be the prick, but everybody else should be just a little more forceful about what we're doing to let people know. Be at the ribbon cuttings. Don't be ashamed of that part. And the activists who want to make them go further than they currently are, or you want to carry this program, improve on it, add to it, all those kind of things, shutting them down, which is what we run into a lot, shutting down those ribbon cuttings or interfering with those kind of like, we're doing this for working people. No, you're not. Right. That kind of stuff interferes with it slows the roll. It stops the momentum in that regard.
Yes,
And Republicans
I agree.
don't suffer from that at all. And that's, that's part of the weight of being an inclusive party. Not everybody's gonna feel like they're completely taken care of because we're trying to take care of everybody. It's the, it's the curse of the generalist. Here's what I would say though. Should we start taking it as a victory? This is kind of a loaded question. When Republicans start talking about stuff that we have been advocating for. The easiest example is like, yeah, go ahead, because I'll give you my example too. But
it's so frustrating when we have laid the foundation and we have put everything in place, and then the momentum starts going. Perfect thing, right? The infrastructure bill. I was so proud of the Biden administration for creating these big, gigantic signs. And there's many examples here just in the Midwest, right? Within like Indiana, Illinois, Wisconsin, Michigan. This project brought to you by, right? And it's by President Biden, and then, our secretaries that helped, and the departments. That's what I want to see. I want to see these signs going up. I want to see more of this. Put up billboards talking about it. Yell it from the rooftops.
Yes.
And what happens is we lay this foundation, and then there's an administrative change, right? Change of guard. And yet the Republican Party ends up taking credit for all of these things you voted against. You voted against it.
Yes. And then you're,
oh my gosh.
But so I would say that applies absolutely to the stuff that we passed. That's our thing. But one of the examples I would give is food additives. All of a sudden, RFK Jr. and his Maha bullshit, when he's not busy trying to give children measles all over the place, because best to get infectious disease over with. I'm talking to you, Ebola. Is that on our side of the aisle for quite a long time, I think a lot of us have been talking about, why don't we have the same food rules that Europe has or Canada has, and we don't want these chemical additives and microplastics and all those kind of things. And I would argue that the minute they step foot in that area, because we can't just fall into, you can't allow people to have a victory ever. I would go even further than saying they're doing something right. I would just say, claim that idea. Finally, our idea is so popular, Trump can't even not do it. And that is another way, I think, of being at the ribbon cutting for something that somebody else is taking credit for. I think that's what Democrats have to do. Like, this is, anytime they're talking about food additives and RFK Jr. brings that up, and like, I'm so glad you and the Trump administration have come around to a Democratic idea and talking point we've been trying to get through this committee for a long time. Thank you for giving us that win. But in the meantime, how about vaccinations? Like, literally taking credit for the ideas that come through. Trump's whole thing about don't F with Medicare and Medicaid isn't because he's trying to differentiate himself from Democrats in this regard. He's afraid of losing some of the Democrats that went over to him or independents that lean towards him, and he's right. If they do these cuts, they will lose those people. They know this. And so basically he's touting a Democratic ideal right now. He realizes that our idea, a strong and healthy Medicare, Medicaid, and Social Security, where the benefits are not taken away from people, especially people at their most desperate, is politically the valuable position. And I feel like one of the ways we can do this is, even if he tries to claim these himself, to go just straight up call this as a Democratic plan. He's having to do this because he's going to lose voters if he doesn't. Our ideas are
he didn't just wake up one day and decide, I actually care about old people, right? I mean, no, this is a politically beneficial position that he's got to take now.
And to your donor state idea that we're talking about, again, if you cut Medicare, Medicaid, and Social Security benefits or whatever, honest to God, it's going to affect the blue states less, because they have other support structures from local taxes and state taxes that will fill in the gap a little bit, even if it's difficult, even if it costs the city and it costs the state. There's definitely programs there. And there's also a bigger tax base of humans that have a generous streak. So they might set up, a charitable situation that backfills it even more. It's the red states that are going to get screwed in this. And those Medicaid, Medicare, and Social Security benefits are most crucial in low population rural states, where Trump wants to claim he won all the counties. They're solid red because there's no fucking people in them. There's like 15 people in the whole county, and it's just a road that goes through Nebraska, but he won the county because it was 15 votes. And these people are the ones that are going to be hurt. And as Democrats, one of the things that I think we can also pounce on is we care about your voters more than you do. And you realize that without blue states, your voters are screwed. You and I talked a little bit about, Chicago versus the southern part of the state and the tax split that goes on there, that Chicago really is the funding mechanism for all of Illinois. And it doesn't devalue the people that live in the southern part of the state, but the schools, the hospitals, the road repairs, all that kind of stuff. We're talking about tax dollars that largely come out of the metropolitan Chicagoland area, clearly. In the same way that Bakersfield is not on par with San Francisco or Los Angeles or San Diego or Napa Valley, right? So they're not pulling their weight. And there's no shame in that. They're rural towns and all that kind of stuff. But when you draw a line politically and go, we don't like these big blue things that, and we're independent down here, without realizing how much you actually need those tax funds to survive, I think we got to start reminding these folks.
Well, because that's a sophisticated ideal. It's not simple. That doesn't fit on a bumper sticker, Hal. So it's more of a complicated thing to explain. On their surface, taxes seem so simplistic. And I assure you, now that I'm kind of under the hood, right, a little bit, they are not. It's very complex. It's very complicated, right? We're starting to receive our property tax bill. And, the city of Woodstock, people love to say our taxes keep going up. Well, when you look at your property tax bill, I assure you, just the tiny portion of where your money goes, guess where it goes? It goes to the school district, right? And then it starts going down the county level. So you want to talk about where this is just property taxes, where the property taxes go, right? So, and now multiply that by things like income tax, sales tax. Where does all of that go? Who's making those decisions? How does it get divvied out? And yes, I would argue that Chicago Metro and then our surrounding, of which I'm in McHenry County, we are one of the collar counties. That is where your big chunks of tax is. And the decision in Springfield, Illinois, our state capital, is how do you take what is due and owed at a state level and distribute it?
Right.
And I'm okay with that.
Yeah.
I want a healthy, educated populace. I want infrastructure improved. I want people taken care of when they really desperately need it. I'm okay with that.
But I agree. I think my point is that I need people. I want them to start recognizing that more, instead of there's a very us versus them thing that develops out of this idea that they don't. The blue states pay for the red states. Period. End of story. Any graph or anything you look at that shows you who sends tax dollars in and where they go out. For every dollar of tax dollars that California puts in, they get 70 cents back from the federal government or something like that. For every dollar that North Dakota puts in, they get like $1.26 back. They make money on the deal. They make 25% more in support from the federal government than they pay in taxes. So they get all that money back and then some. And for their roads and their bridges and their schools, and then they go, we don't have to have an income tax because we've got barely any people and 2 senators and a giant state with very few human beings in it, and the rest of it's all like NORAD and coal companies. So what's the problem? But what they end up doing is, when they don't confront the fact that they get all those federal funds that are put in by blue states, by the Chicagoland area, by New York, by, and I will even say Houston, Dallas, and Miami and places like that, which again, Democratic strongholds in a lot of ways, even in spite of the fact that Texas is a red state. You get Democratic mayors in Houston, for example, all the time. And it's because they're better at managing more complex structures that require all these things, that require, how do you funnel that much money from that many sources and put that all together? That complex thing under the hood you're talking about takes work, and you have to want to do the work. And I don't think Republicans want to do the work at all. And I think what we've got to do is start reminding red state voters that if they really want to balance the budget, they should start arguing 1-to-1, tax dollar for tax dollar. The states that you get in what you pay out, you get out what you pay in on an even level. Nobody has to carry your weight for you, and if anybody has any excess, they keep it. That the tax number for states should be even. They've all got the same number of senators, no matter how many people they have. If California has to have 2 senators for 44 million people, and North Dakota has 2 senators for less than 1 million or something, then I can argue that it should be 1-to-1. You don't get $1.26 back, okay? That's in services and all that other stuff. And if you want more of that, you have to directly and publicly request it. We've done similar things like this a little bit. That's why you have to request emergency support from the presidency. So most presidents sign off on it immediately. But the idea is that you have to ask. You have to do this. And I think we need to remind them. The next election cycle, one of the big reminders has to be that the reason you guys are more affected by these cuts than the blue states are is because you've been relying on the federal government this entire time, and you've either been lying to your constituents about it or lying to yourselves, or you just didn't know. And if you didn't know, I'm here to tell you.
Yeah. And I don't mean this in an insulting way, right? My background as a teacher, and now I'm in marketing. Communication, clear, precise, short, right? They're really good at these, just what I would call these like really quick snapshots, bumper
that's because
sticker
lying
statements.
lying always works better in brevity. Long, complicated lies are very difficult because you can't manage them, whatever. Yes. But short slices of bullshit and then running out the door is very easy to do. I think lean into that complexity. Like the fallback used to be Google it. And I think ultimately that's how you end up doing it. Is like red states, only exist because of blue state taxes. Google it. And that is as short and as sweet as you need to get into it. And here's what I would also argue. Like you said, I don't mind. I do want a well-elected, well-educated populace. I do want clean water for everyone. I want the roads to be consistent across the United States. So if you drive a truck or you take a family vacation, you don't have to hit dirt roads in Nebraska, just because the shitheels decided that they wanted a chili cook-off instead of, paving the roads this year, right? I don't think we need to do that. And I want... Same thing with Medicare, Medicaid, and Social Security. Do that expansion. The one thing I think that the Biden administration missed on some of these projects was you saw those in Illinois, but it's the rural broadband that really was the selling point on that and will ultimately be the legacy more that and removing lead pipes. Those 2 things set in motion will be the 2 biggest legacies, even though there's a ton of other things. The smart grid, better FAA system. All
CHIPS Act.
Yeah, the CHIPS Act, absolutely. But in the infrastructure bill, rural broadband will have and removing the lead pipes from drinking water will have the longest singular aspect, longest legacy of everything in that thing. A lot of infrastructure, you have to keep rebuilding it all the time because that's what happens. It physically fails because of environment and time. But these kind of things will set things in motion or eliminate a toxin that affects people's lives, and the ripple effect of that is immeasurably good. But I think it's up to us. Maybe that's the thing we've stumbled on today. And I appreciate you coming on. I know it's my show normally ends at 11 my time, but and you could come on the early part where we'd have a full hour. But I want to thank you for coming on and discussing this with me. But I think what we can do in all these situations is that, what we might walk away with is the blue states pay for the red states. Google it. And that is that short version that we're talking about. That, blue states are donor states. Google it. That in and of itself, I think, will land in a way that you don't have to explain all the complexity. Let them go, because we live in a very complex time. People will watch, they'll binge watch, they're watching the Diddy trial and taking notes. Like, people aren't afraid of complexity when it excites or interests them or challenges them. So maybe that's the trick, is that
and you know who's really getting good at this, and I think is starting to really frame it very well? Governor Pritzker, our governor.
Yes, I agree.
He's getting really, really good at taking this message, his messages, and just driving them with consistency and standing up to things and just being a fierce advocate and saying, I'm not going to back down. You can try it, but good luck. Right? And just really being strong, stalwart in his convictions and saying Illinois is not going to stand for these things specifically. And just the consistency of the message, and how the delivery mechanism works.
Correct.
He's one to watch. I really enjoy, Pete Buttigieg is one of those people. His mechanism, the way he delivers the message, he's educated, but he's approachable, and it's consistent. And I just, there's certain people I'm starting to pay so much more attention to, right?
Sure.
I take for granted here in Illinois, okay, I've got Pritzker, this is great. Now it's, every time I can listen or watch, I'm really paying attention, yes, to what he says, but it's the how is he delivering the message? I think is really amazing and very critical.
Agreed. Well, thank you for coming on. I would love to do this again sometime.
Absolutely.
And especially
we'll
when we
pick
talk
a topic and we'll just riff. We'll riff.
Well,
on
here's
it
what
for a little bit.
here's what I would say is that occasionally, if you would, it'd be great to have you on the radio show, because we deal with Chicago politics, specifically, as well as their kind of linkage to the national and the international, and again, that financial and economic base and that cultural base that is Chicago is partly what it is because of its international connection and its economic connection to the integrity of the U.S. economy. Even our Ukrainian diaspora in Chicagoland is a crucial aspect of what's going on in this war, as is, by the way, the Russian diaspora of people who fled, who've come to the United States from Russia, going, this is what we've been talking about. We don't want to live in a country that attacks places like Ukraine. And there we have, I guess, the fellow travelers for our side that are like, this is why we didn't want to go into Iraq. This makes sense. Like, we're together, we can stand for a kind of government that is representative of the people and doesn't go on these adventurous things, while at the same time not ignoring the plight in Sudan while people are being slaughtered, and trying to do its best, working together with international partners to protect the people who are, in a dangerous situation. That Medicare empathy that we have, that Medicaid empathy that we have for people who are in a rough spot, should extrapolate to the world as best we can help. So I'd love to talk to you about that at some point, and I really appreciate you, and we all love you around here, and so I was glad to have you.
Thank you. I love you guys. Thanks for having me, and we'll talk soon. Thanks, Al.
Okay. All right. Cheers. See you later. There she goes. Nancy, everybody, from the Woodstock City Council in Illinois, who has been a big part of. She was a chatter just like you guys. Just saying. She's like, I first was introduced to Nat, I think in Steph's I think she called in on Steph and as part of my chat room and that kind of thing. And so she decided to run for office, and she won, and she's on the Woodstock City Council. So I find that very inspiring. I think it's lovely. She's terrific, and she's right that we need a brevity of these kind of things. And I know it's a lot coming from Mr. Longform and Midwestern Goodbye, but one of the things I can say is that as we work through these things, we do come to kind of gems that work. Hashtag Doge is a heist. Hashtag Rip Portland, as jokey as it is, pointed to the ridiculousness of Trump's bullshit about Portland burning to the ground and how that's not even close to true and it's just dumb. And the same thing here. I would argue one of the things we need to say is blue states pay for red states. Google it. The red states live off of the blue states. Google it. You know, that's one of the things you can drop for people because it is clear and obvious economically. And it is exactly what's driving the wedge between Republicans in this bill that they're trying to get passed through. It is the reality that they are smashing up against. So, you know, just consider that. And I will see you guys this afternoon. Yes, we'll be... This show breezed by, I would like to say. Super fast today. Got an hour of me, an hour of Phil, half hour of Nat Z, and I got all of you guys. Did we get 10 subscribers? Did we get 10 new subscribers? Do I just not leave until... Should I do one of those like marathon things soon where I just stay online, just going, I'm going to stay on, as long as I get, you know, I don't know, 100 subscribers an hour, I will stay on. Look at that, we've gone up like 50 in the last few days. We're getting close. We are 54 subscriptions away from 82,000. We can do this. We can do this week. We can get 50 subscribers today, couldn't we? That's not impossible. You can do that. I mean, unless you think, you know, what I'm doing here isn't work or something. I don't think I care. I guess that's up to you. I'm not trying to guilt you about this. I'm just saying, subscribe, will you? I'll see you this afternoon.
Gee, I wish we had one of them doomsday machines.
You think you know something about everything, don't you?
That's great psychology. Why don't you just say something bad about my mother?
He's a genius, see?
Looking around here, I can tell you're a genuinely dirty person.
It's good to be the king.
The sportos, the motorheads, geeks, sluts, bloods, wastoids, dweebies, dickheads, they all adore him. They think he's a righteous dude.
Know what time it is?
This is my sister. You can all have her. I hear she's very good.
Lady, I'm afraid I'm going to have to ask you to leave the store.
Something strange happened to me this morning. Was it a dream where you see yourself standing in sort of sun god robes on a pyramid with 1,000 naked women screaming and throwing little pickles at you? No. Why am I the only person that has that dream?
Oh, did we rate Cliff already? Excellent.